Pirate God Level Cartoonist, Chapter 261 to 280. Chapter 261 Dig a hole, bury some soil. The speed of the golden streamer is extremely fast, and it only took dozens of hours for a distance of several kilometers to reach the sky above the island. Wherever he passed, there were even bursts of air-shattering sounds. Blackbeard, who was staying on the top of the mountain, naturally heard the sound first. Under the doubts, Blackbeard looked up, and when he saw the golden streamer that was gradually approaching, he felt a great sense of unease, and quickly took out the binoculars and looked over. What entered his eyes was a golden boat. Although he could not see the top of the golden boat because of the angle, when Blackbeard saw the black armored warriors and the golden boat in the hanging basket hanging under the golden boat, it looked like he was still shaking a bit. "Gee, Gilgamesh," Blackbeard couldn't help but exclaimed and stood up abruptly. But soon, Blackbeard reacted, and hurriedly fell down, using both hands and feet, and hurried down the mountain. When he came to the foot of the mountain, Blackbeard looked around in a panic, but in the end he couldn't help it. He directly smashed a hole in the ground. He didn't care about the mess, he found some dead branches and leaves to cover his body and lay down. In the end, he still felt a little unsafe, dug another pile of soil, and buried himself in it. No way, no wonder Blackbeard panicked, it was because Gilgamesh's record was too terrifying. It can even be said that the Dimension Brigade has its current reputation, and Gilgamesh takes most of the credit. Just killing the 4 emperors Kaido and creating 100 miles of dead Jedi is enough for everyone in this world to look up. For ordinary people, that is already a godlike power. Of course, Gilgamesh is also at the top of Blackbeard's least wanted enemies. When he met Whitebeard, he pretended to be pitiful and begged for mercy, and there might still be a chance of survival, but if he met Gilgamesh, who would get angry at every turn, and even felt insulted at the same height as ordinary people, I am afraid he would not even know how to die. However, just as Blackbeard was lying in the pit to disguise, suddenly, a feeling of being watched appeared in his mind, which made his heart palpitate. However, even if he looked left and right from the gaps in the leaves, he didn't see anyone there. Is it an illusion? I think I'm too nervous. Blackbeard comforted himself. In his thoughts, Gilgamesh, who is far above the birdcage, is impossible. Find him. However, Blackbeard, who thought he was well concealed, had no idea that his every move was already under the surveillance of the android. In the hanging basket under the golden boat, the spirit-type android in jet black armor retracted his gaze from the hiding place of Blackbeard, and looked at the battlefield in the jungle for a while, then stood up and cautiously looked towards Gilgamesh. Bow deeply. Lord Gilgamesh, it has been confirmed that the 2 groups of people fighting below are the Don Quixote family and the CP0, an intelligence organization directly under the world government. Another person is hiding at the foot of the mountain below, with a high risk index. Standing on the bow of the golden boat, Gilgamesh, who folded his arms across his chest, automatically blocked the words, high risk index, and a contemptuous smile appeared on his face. The Don Quixote family, I remember finding these guys the second priority. And what happened to that CP0? Gilgamesh asked, looking at the birdcage under him with a displeased look on his face. This kind of thing, dare to block his way. Yes, the task of finding the Don Quixote family is second only to the rescue of Phoenix, Marco. As for CP0, they are a secret organization under the world government. It is rare for a large number of people to appear. If it does, there will definitely be a big mission. The androids under the ship searched for the information in their minds and replied again and again. That means it's possible that Marco is in their hands too. 93% chance. The android calculated. Enough. Gilgamesh raised his head slightly, and a few golden ripples appeared behind him. Afterwards, several luxurious treasures, with powerful momentum and a piercing scream, stabbed above the birdcage, making a sound of gold and iron symphony. Then, fell. The android turned around in unison according to the precautions Roha had temporarily input, and pretended not to see it. Gilgamesh. Ellipsis 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 ellipsis. 9 flowers. A few seconds later, an android opened his mouth and said, Lord Gilgamesh, according to the information input by Lord Roha, the cage-shaped thread below is, the thread fruit ability, Doflamingo's stunt, defensive power. It's amazing. If you touch it, you will be damaged, please adults and small. The android didn't say the second half of the sentence, because beside him, dozens of noble phantasms whizzed past. The ability of a mere bastard actually dares to provoke the sharpness of this king's noble phantasm. I don't know whether to live or die. Gilgamesh's face turned black when he made such a big appearance in front of the android, and the golden ripples behind him representing the treasure of the king increased rapidly, and in a blink of an eye, the number increased to more than 40. The rain of noble phantasm like a hurricane poured down, as if it were endless, and the birdcage was trembling, and the color instantly dimmed. Boom boom boom. The dense roar resounded through the sky, shaking the entire island. When I heard this sound, in the jungle below, the two groups of people who were fighting fiercely took a few steps back and raised their heads in fear. The first thing that caught their eyes was the golden streamer like a hurricane, which was the afterimage of the noble phantasm's extremely fast flight. Looking further up, it is the golden boat. Everyone was stunned when they saw the golden-haired Jinkai man standing on the bow of the golden boat, holding his arms, and the golden light like a lake behind him. Gee Gilga, Mish, I don't know who it was, and let out a terrified exclamation, awakening everyone who was stunned. Looking at the figure in the sky, boundless fear permeates everyone's heart, as if the scythe of the god of death has been placed on the neck. With a slight movement, it can harvest life. What to do, boss? What to do? It's over, it's actually found, and Gilgamesh himself came here. How about, let's surrender. We've seen the two Holy Grail wars, let's make ourselves a little dirty and ugly, lie on the ground and beg him. Maybe Gilgamesh will be afraid of dirtying his own noble phantasm. Don't kill us. Chapter 262 Escape. The fighting in the jungle has completely stopped, and everyone is in chaos. Hearing the so-called suggestion of kneeling down and begging for mercy, among the surrounding CP0 members, there were unexpected expressions on their faces. After all, not everyone thinks that dignity is higher than life, especially the insidious and cunning members of CP0. What are you kidding? Kneel down and beg for mercy. Do you still want your face? The monkey-faced man yelled at his companions, and even kicked a companion who wiped the dirt on his face with a violent kick. Turning to look at Brother Doflamingo, the monkey-faced man whispered in a trembling voice, What do you want to do? Wait to die, or untie your damn cage and let everyone escape. Don't think I don't know, you are also on the hunt list of the Dimension Brigade. A struggling look appeared on Doflamingo's face, his eyes constantly wandering on CP0 and Marco, as well as Gilgamesh above. Young Master, Buffalo, who had several bloodstains on his body, called Doflamingo nervously. Young Master, withdraw, we will help you delay time. Young Master, give the order, it's too late. The people of the Don Quixote family opened their mouths one after another, with a look of death on their faces. Above them, under the attack of Gilgamesh, the bird cage was trembling and crumbling, and it seemed that it was about to be completely defeated. Doflamingo turned his head and looked at Buffalo, who was covered in dust and blood, who was in a state of embarrassment. He also looked at the members of the Don Quixote family who were all around him. The struggling expression on his face became even stronger. Finally, Doflamingo exhaled a long breath, and his face flashed. Withdraw. Everyone runs towards the north. One can run away, and no one can stop. You can't delay Gilgamesh at all, you'll just die in vain. Yes. Seeing that the members of the Don Quixote family started to leave, Doflamingo suddenly turned to look at the monkey-faced man. You guys, run to the south. Impossible. The monkey-faced man became anxious, and was about to object. What a joke, Gilgamesh is to the south, and if they take Marco to the south, wouldn't it be a dead end? Either you all go south, or I will try to keep you all, and everyone will die here. Brother Doflamingo rudely interrupted the monkey-faced man and shouted fiercely. "What are you doing?" The monkey-faced man pointed at Brother Doflamingo, looked at the determination on Brother Doflamingo's face, was speechless for a while, and finally could only give Brother Doflamingo a fierce look, eyes resentful. "I remember what happened today, and it will be rewarded in the future." After finishing speaking, the monkey-faced man hurriedly ran to the CP0 crowd and began to give orders. After forcibly ordering a few people to bring Marco, the members of CP0 disappeared into the jungle one after another. On the other side, Doflamingo looked at his companions with a worried expression not far away, nodded comfortably, and set off to run towards the jungle. The Don Quixote family began to flee. In the sky, seeing the two groups below, breaking into pieces and running in all directions, the anger on Gilgamesh's face became more and more obvious. Although it was only a few tens of seconds from when he started attacking, but he, who claimed to be the oldest king, was actually blocked by the ability of a bastard, which made Gilgamesh keep calm. Raising his hand, he squeezed lightly towards the void beside him. Then, Gilgamesh suddenly burst out with amazing magic power. The magic power like a volcanic eruption swept all around, and it was even said that the powerful magic power had already affected the reality. Above the sky, a dark blue magic vortex suddenly appeared. A peculiarly shaped sword slowly emerged from the void and appeared in Doflamingo's hand. Deviant's sword EA. Gilgamesh's strongest noble phantasm once killed Kaido in one blow. "You bastards, you and this island will be buried for the king's wrath." In Gilgamesh's blood-red pupils, the murderous intent boiled, and the surging magic power blew his blonde hair, and the king's domineering showed this. But at this moment, the cry of an artificial human suddenly came from the hanging basket below. "Lord Gilgamesh, please stop. The Marco that Mr. Roja named is still below. The explosive rock of the Don Quixote family is still missing. If you kill them all, it will destroy Mr. Roja's plan. Please think about it." Roja. Hearing Roja's name, a struggling look appeared on Gilgamesh's face. He wanted to say, "The dignity of a king cannot be violated," not even Roja, but the mighty power of the system still defeated Gilgamesh. Awareness of. With a cold snort, Gilgamesh angrily took back the deviant's sword. "Mark Marco's location to this king, you guys go down and track down the Don Quixote family. Use your lives to hold them back. The duty is." The android nodded lightly, without the slightest emotion on his face. With Gilgamesh, there are only 4 robo-robots for reconnaissance, and their fighting ability, even if the 4 of them are added together, they can't beat any cadre of the Don Quixote family. But at the beginning of the creation of androids, completing tasks was their first priority, so even if they knew they were dead, they would continue to perform. This king appreciates you a little now, and this king is willing to admit that you are real warriors. Gilgamesh glanced at the 4 androids who looked at death as if at home in surprise, but his subordinates showed no mercy. A more ferocious attack slammed on the birdcage. A few seconds and 2.6, the birdcage that covered the sky finally turned into a slender thread in the sky with a roar, and it floated to the ground in pieces. Without any hesitation, Gilgamesh chased after the members of CP0. The 4 androids in the hanging basket, after the golden boat lowered its height, decisively fell from a height of tens of meters, caught the buffer of the tree crown and branches, landed successfully, and chased the members of the Don Quixote family who were far away. Direction. Seeing that the golden boat in the sky turned into a golden streamer chasing towards the south, the golden rippled sea shot out countless noble phantasms, sweeping towards the ground. Doflamingo finally let out a sigh of relief. But at this moment, in the sky directly in front of them, there was another sonic boom that broke through the air. Chapter 263 Ming Brother Who Broke Out of Desperation. The members of the Don Quixote family, who had already fled frantically like lost dogs, were already tense, and the sudden sound of breaking in the air made them even more startled, thinking that Gilgamesh was chasing after them. However, when Doflamingo looked up, his pupils shrank even more. He couldn't help cursing, but his heart sank. I saw above the sky, a boy with white hair and red eyes in casual clothes, with his hands in his trouser pockets, a look of tugging. What is surprising is that he stood directly in the air without any movement. The only one who can do this is the one who can manipulate various vectors arbitrarily and keep flying by manipulating gravity and wind direction. And along with Accelerator, there were more than a dozen cyborg warriors in black armor who were wrapped in his abilities. At this point, the android warriors had already jumped into the jungle and began to pursue. There is Accelerator in the front and Gilgamesh in the back. Hearing the sound of battle suddenly resounding around, Doflamingo's face couldn't help showing a frantic look. Everyone, don't fight, keep running. Oh wait, leave everything to me. Doflamingo's eyes were red and bloodshot, and an unprecedented madness appeared on his face. Maybe for the great cause, he can give up a few comrades, but let him give up all the comrades who have lived and died with him for many years. Let him lose everything, even Doflamingo can't do it. Between the limits of life and death, Doflamingo completely ran away, and an unprecedented powerful momentum rose from Doflamingo. The ground beneath his feet gradually turned into a vast white silk thread, and the scope was gradually expanding. A few seconds later, the area transformed by Doflamingo's awakening has reached nearly 1,000 square meters, and the number of silk threads is uncountable. Even Doflamingo couldn't bear the ability to use the fruit at such an extreme level. Roots of blue veins appeared all over his body, and his strong body was trembling constantly. He even said that there were bloodstains left in his 7 orifices. At this time, Doflamingo was covered in blood, and his face was as ferocious as a devil. I will take you with me even if I die today. Brother Doflamingo roared wildly, resolutely activated his ability. The veins on his body burst, and blood flowers bloomed on his body. Above the earth, hundreds of millions of silk threads rose up, layer upon layer, intertwined with each other, flying into the sky like thousands of white giant pythons, wandering in the jungle. Of the dozen or so android warriors, several were seriously injured in an instant, and the remaining android warriors, after a brief hesitation, knew that they were invincible, and hurriedly evacuated and retreated to the rear until they escaped from Doflamingo's limit attack distance. Looking at the countless white pythons piercing the air and attacking him in a blinding manner, Accelerator's expression did not change, and he stared coldly at Doflamingo's desperate attack with disdain in his eyes. Trash. 10 minutes ago, on the edge of the island of the G5 branch. The battle between Roja and Garp continues. Boom boom boom. The dull roaring sound continued to explode, like a giant hammer, hitting his heart. If there are ordinary people present at this time, I am afraid that there is no need to be affected by the battle between the two. As long as you stand for a while, you will be shocked to death by this continuous explosion. Under Capuna's extreme physical skills and the domineering armament of the peak level, Roja has been at a disadvantage for a long time. But even so, Roja kept swinging and slashing, looking for all possible flaws. However, not at all. Garp's combat experience and physical training are really too terrifying. The boxing seems to be messy, but in fact, it maintains a considerable degree of discipline. It is very mysterious between punching and kicking, advancing and retreating, without any flaws. Reveal. Once Roja killed Kaido, he thought that the physical skills in this world were just like that. The terrifying part of the strong physique. The tyrannical physique, the simple physical technique, the ultimate armed look and domineering. After the fusion of the three, Garp, even Roja, can't help but curse. Perverted. And Garp's tyranny is not only that, his real strength lies in the combat experience he has cultivated by fighting countless powerhouses in time. No, on Garp, that is no longer combat experience, it should be called combat instinct. Completely instinctive combat experience, so that Garp can resist Roja's attack and seek opportunities to counterattack without thinking at all. Even Roja's foresight can't completely predict Garp's offensive. Boom. It was another time to face the bombardment. The earth-shattering explosion sounded, and the ground under the two of them shattered, and Garp and Roja retreated more than 10 meters, and stopped the offensive at the same time. Shaking his numb fists, Garp looked at Roja with a look of amazement in his eyes. Boy, it's very good. Garp sighed in admiration, then his eyes paused on Roja's sword for a moment, the style of painting changed, and he asked, however, where did you learn your swordsmanship? There are traces of that fellow Yagyu Jianzhen everywhere. It's not worth mentioning the inheritance of Lu Sheng's predecessors by fluke. Roja also reacted after being surprised for a short time. When Garp became famous in 097, Yagyu Jianzhen hadn't lived in seclusion, and it was estimated that he had played against each other more than once. I didn't expect that old guy Yagyu to have an apprentice. Garp pouted, and immediately assumed a fighting stance. However, if you want to rely on Yagyu Jianzhen's swordsmanship to beat me, forget it. Quote. Even though that guy was the former #1 swordsman in the world, he was only the #1 swordsman, not the #1 powerhouse. What's more, he was still the defeated general of this old man. Speaking of the end, Garp couldn't help but show a proud look on his face, and his momentum greatly increased. It turned out to be like this. Roja chuckled and shook his head. No wonder Garp always caught some subtle flaws during the battle. It turned out that he knew the swordsmanship of Yagyu Jianzhen very well, and even said that he might have completely grasped the swordsmanship of Yagyu Jianzhen. It seemed that it was impossible to defeat Garp with pure swordsmanship. In this case, I can only show my ugliness. Roja breathed a sigh of relief, and immediately assumed a strange fighting posture. Change the previous posture of holding the knife with both hands, and change to holding the knife with one hand in the right hand, squatting down, and pressing the ground with the left hand. It is like a beast that is ready to slay its prey. Chapter 264 Guild Wars Garp. Oh, interesting. Seeing Roja's posture, Garp couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. An expression of interest appeared on his face, but he was more vigilant in his heart. For some reason, from Roja, Garp actually felt a faint sense of threat. Before, although the two had fought for a long time, Capco never felt this way. Not simple. Mr. Garp, I'm coming. Roja smiled lightly, and in the next instant, his figure disappeared in place. What? Garp frowned, and the body of 100 battles had already moved before he could react. Twisting your waist and turning around as an elbow shake. Scoff. The steel-like sound of the sharp blade swiped, and the blade in Roja's hand slid over Garp's domineering arm full of armed colors. However, this time, the sound of the fight between the two was not so loud, because Roja just used the sword to guide Garp's elbow to hit the air, with a string of afterimages on his right foot, and kicked Garp's shoulder suddenly. Boom. Garp swayed a few meters and stopped. Roja did not pursue the victory, but stopped and looked at Garp with a hint of regret on his face. With the kick just now, he wanted to kick Garp's neck. Unexpectedly, at the same time as the kick, Garp put his foot up and blocked it with his shoulder. Just at that moment, I can understand Roja's intentions and respond accordingly. Such fighting consciousness is really terrifying. Not bad, very good. But boy, are you still a swordsman like this? Garp moved his shoulders, not only because of the embarrassment just now, but he laughed very happily, as if he had finally met an opponent who could let him use all his strength and fight happily. Tilda. Of course not, but I wasn't a swordsman originally. Roja smiled and replied casually. Indeed, in Roja's positioning for himself, he has never been a swordsman. Practicing swordsmanship is just one of his hobbies. Phew. If Roja's strength is regarded as 100, excluding the power of incarnation of a manga character, swordsmanship only accounts for 20% of his points. In addition to this, there is a part that relies on his tyrannical physical quality after the liberation of the stigmata, and the remaining part is passive skills such as foresight, flexible hands, and staying in his storage space. Countless ability fragments in. Boy, if you don't come, the old man will pass. Garp shouted with a laugh, and immediately rushed towards Roja. This is also the first time that Garp launched an attack in this battle, and because of this, it can be seen that Garp has truly turned Roja Adam into an equal-level opponent. Boom. Tearing the air, a punch that was enough to shatter the battleship slammed out. However, it missed the target. At the moment when Garp rushed over, Roha had already activated teleportation, and this time, Roha's teleportation choice was not behind Garp, but Garp's arms. Because of the fist, Garp, who opened the empty door, watched Roha appear in his arms and put on a strange posture. Then, bumped over. Bajakwan Tishan Relai. Learn from the shape of the month, the magic gun, Li Xuan. The text has Tai Chi, the world is safe, the martial arts have 8 extremes, and the universe is fixed. The power of this blow is far beyond Garp's imagination. Even at the moment when Roha approached, he slightly blocked it with his left hand and relieved a little of his strength, but even so, Garp still had the same feeling as being hit by a sea train. In the face of this fierce and powerful force, Garp, who was as strong as an ox, was forcibly knocked out dozens of meters away, and his feet even pulled out 2 deep ravines on the ground. This time, Roha never gave Garp a chance to breathe, rushing up and fighting. Sword light radiated in all directions, fists and feet collided. Fists, elbows, legs, knees, shoulders, head, all over the body, any part, in Roha's hands, has become a deadly weapon. The attack method is strange, but there are hidden murderous intentions everywhere. Even Garp has never seen such a bizarre fighting style. Sometimes, just after holding Roha's sword, he has to face the sudden whip leg below. Blocking the sudden knee strike, the upper body had to face another slash. A little distance away, it was a series of white sword energy that seemed to be free of money, which made Garp wonder if Roha was a human being, and how could he be so physically strong. The situation was completely reversed. This time, Garp, who was hit by Roha's fierce attack, kept retreating. The two of them had been hitting the beach at the northeast corner of the island to the beach at the southeast foot. Wherever the two fought, they encountered trees and cut trees, encountered rocks and rubble, and even a small hill was completely flattened. On the entire island, there was an ugly blank space, as if it was cut by a barber. Fader, pushed past the general. Chapter 265 Battle Between Monsters. The peak duel between Roha and Garp has lasted for 2 hours without knowing it. Even if the two have tried their best to restrain their power and not destroy the environment of the island, but even so, the entire east of the island, outside the town, has been completely destroyed. Tens of meters long cracks spread all over the earth. Thousands of trees in the sky fell to the ground. Several mountain peaks that were involved in the battle were even more dilapidated. Ground gravel smoke. Under such a battle between the two world's top powerhouses, the entire island fell into panic. Birds and beasts fled in a hurry, and the screams of beasts resounded across the island. Occasionally, there are beasts who are in a hurry, accidentally getting closer to the place where Roha and the two fought, but before the beasts can escape, they will be stunned by the terrifying aura that the two people unintentionally exude, and collapse to the ground. Even the town where the G5 branch was located was completely silent. All the residents had already received an urgent notice to evacuate all the Navy members. All the residents hid on the other side of the island, gathered together and shivered. Brother Navy, why are we here? 037. Quote. Among the crowd, a little girl hugged a teddy bear, pulled the corner of a Navy soldier's shirt, raised her head, and asked Mengmeng. Children, because there are bad guys over there, Mr. Garp is beating bad guys. If we go over, it will drag Mr. Garp down. The Navy soldier crouched down and touched the child's head. Although he smiled, there was still a look of worry on his face. When Roha and Garp just left the G5 branch, all the navies didn't care too much, and there was even time for jokes. After all, in their minds, Garp is an invincible existence, a cadre of the Mere Dimension Brigade. It will not take long to solve it. But no one expected that 2 full hours had passed, and the battle in the east of the island had not ended, but instead the roaring sounds were more frequent and had a tendency to intensify. Now all the navies are not calm. Anxiety and fear filled the hearts of all those who knew the inside story. Oh, so it is. The little girl looked suddenly enlightened. but soon she raised her head again with a curious look on her face. "But, brother, why don't you help Grandpa Garp beat the bad guys?" Because we want to protect you." The Navy soldier felt embarrassed for a while, and finally managed to cope with it, hurried away, feeling ashamed. And, alternative, and GT. As a Navy soldier, you cannot guarantee the safety of ordinary people, you can only give hope to others and wait for death. This kind of situation makes all Navy soldiers feel bad in their hearts. But what can they do? Those two people can't be called human at all. Rather, two monsters. Virgo, who is standing at the top of the G5 branch, looks into the distance with that kind of telescope. Where he was watching, there was a constant roar like Hongjiang Dalu, the smoke billowing, the wind and waves were heavy, and wherever he passed, a scene like a hurricane passing through. Occasionally, when the two were facing each other, the resulting shock wave was like a missile explosion, and it even blew the clothes on Virgo's body, making noises. One can imagine how fierce the battle between the two was. It was the first time that Virgo saw such a scale of battle, and he was soaked in cold sweat without realizing it. He couldn't imagine how to defeat these two monsters, how Doflamingo could overcome such a strong man and fulfill his dream. "Dover, if it were you, what would you do?" Virgo murmured while looking at the battlefield in the distance. But at this moment, the continuous roaring sound in the distance suddenly stopped, which made Virgo stunned for a moment. "Finished." Virgo raised his eyebrows. However, at the next moment, two unprecedented momentum suddenly rose from the distant battlefield and shot straight into the sky, with an astonishing momentum. From the crowd in the distance, there were bursts of uncontrollable exclamations. All ordinary people only felt their hearts tremble, as if their hearts were hit by a boulder, and they were extremely depressed. And Virgo, who was closer to the battlefield and felt far beyond ordinary people, was stunned in place, and the whole person couldn't help shaking. The stronger the strength, the more sensitive the perception, the more able to perceive the terror of those two imposing manners. At this time, in Virgo's eyes, there seemed to be two demon gods with a height of 100 meters, ferocious armor, and fiery spirits appearing between the heavens and the earth, standing on the island, full of murderous aura, vowing to shred all living beings. But fortunately, these two demon-like auras are opposites, and they are about to launch the final blow. Virgo's breathing couldn't help but quicken, and his body's instinct kept issuing warnings to let him escape from this place of right and wrong, the sooner the better. But at this time, how could Virgo leave? Instead of retreating, he suppressed his body's instinct and rushed towards the battlefield. Leaping on the roof and the canopy, Virgo's face was more excited than the fear of death. He knew that if he could see the last blow of those two people and learn a little bit of true meaning from it, his strength would definitely be improved qualitatively. Just as Virgo stepped on the moon step and ascended into the sky, the final blow finally struck. Om! There was no roar, no explosion, and no shriek that ripped through the air. Somewhere just between heaven and earth, the eerie silence, the air condenses and the breeze dissipates, as if time has stopped flowing at this moment. Such a strange situation made Virgo stunned for a while, but in the next second, he seemed to remember something, with a look of horror on his face, and fled towards the ground frantically. But, it's too late. Boom! Thousands of thunderous sounds exploded in the east of the island at the same time, and the deafening explosion sound spread to all parts of the island in the blink of an eye. Virgo, who was less than 100 meters away from the battle site, only felt that someone smashed his head with a hammer, and his mind buzzed, and there was faint blood flowing out of his ears. But even so, Virgo didn't stop, resolutely fled towards the ground, and even said that he used the armed color domineering. Because he knew that the aftermath of the battle was not over. Chapter 266 Result of the Battle. Sure enough, after the deafening sound, the shock wave came. The almost real terror shock wave, centered on the battlefield, suddenly rippled, sweeping the sky and the ground, in all directions. It's too late. Aware of the shock wave, Virgo was shocked, and the whole person hurriedly retreated. At the same time, he stepped on the moon and ran towards the ground below. However, the power of the shock wave exceeded Virgo's expectations. In just an instant, Virgo, who was in the air and had nowhere to help, flew out like a tennis ball being hit. It was not until after following the shock wave and slamming into a giant tree, Virgo barely stopped. Just after stopping, Virgo immediately squatted down, put his head in his hands, and protected the vital parts. Bang bang bang. A series of collision sounds sounded on Virgo's body, which was the gravel and rock and soil swept up by the shock wave. He is too close to the center of the battlefield. At this distance, the lethality of gravel and soil is comparable to bullets. Just when Virgo was delighted by his quick reaction, a sudden whistling sound came. Feeling a little uneasy in his heart, Virgo raised his head subconsciously. When he saw the trunk of a tree that was 6 or 7 meters long and hugged by the two of them, Virgo couldn't help shrinking his pupils and cursed angrily. Fuck. Boom. At a critical juncture, Virgo could only barely hold his arms in front of his chest, and then he was slammed into his chest by the flying tree trunk, and flew out with the smashed tree behind him. This time, Virgo flew dozens of meters away before stopping. After landing, Virgo would be smart. He fell directly to the ground, his hands were inserted into the ground, and he did not move despite the wind and stone. I don't know how long it took, maybe a few seconds, maybe dozens of seconds, the shock wave finally stopped, and the continuous sound of impact on the body also stopped. Cough cough cough. Pushing away the tree trunk that was pressing on him, Virgo was covered in dust and climbed up with a look of embarrassment, but fortunately there were no scars on his body. Although he was in a very embarrassed state just now, it was entirely because he had no place to use his strength in the air. In fact, whether it was beating with flying stones or hitting a giant tree, for him, it was just a small disturbance and could not be harmed at all. The battle, how did it end? Virgo hurriedly got up and looked up in the direction of Roja. Although the destructive power of the battle between the two had long been expected, when Virgo really saw the actual situation, he was still stunned. As far as the eye can see, with the place where Roja and the two fought as the center, the trees within a radius of 100 meters all fell outwards. Although the damage was slightly less than 100 meters away, the surface of the giant tree on the outermost layer was still riddled with holes and tattered by countless sand and stones. And these are just the places where the damage is slightly less, and what really scares Virgo is. In the land between Roja and Karp, an unfathomable terrifying abyss appeared, spreading horizontally and extending straight to both sides of the island. At the point of the huge crack, Virgo even heard the sound of waves. The final blow of Roja and Garp actually split the island in half. As for the center of the battle, Virgo could see two figures lying on both sides of the huge crack, motionless. No, die together, right? Thinking of this, Virgo could not help narrowing his eyes and walked quietly forward. It would be best if they perished together, but if the two were temporarily seriously injured and unable to move, then Virgo would not mind picking up a bargain and sweeping away the two mountains on the way for Doflamingo. Thinking of being able to kill Garp and Roja, Virgo couldn't help shaking with excitement, and his pace couldn't help speeding up. But just when he was less than 50 meters away from Roja, he suddenly saw Roja moving and sitting up. At that moment, a terrifying aura suddenly locked on Virgo, and bloody killing intent filled the air. It was discovered. He can still move. Before I had time to think about it, Virgo, who was originally a frightened bird, finally broke the last nerve in his mind, and the whole person fled frantically like a bereaved dog, and did not test Roja's mind at all. Cut, waste. Seeing Virgo disappearing into the jungle, Roja pouted in disdain and spat out a mouthful of blood. However, just as Roja was about to stand up on the ground, he felt a tingling pain in his chest and right arm bone, making him sit back on the ground again. Hey, this old man Karp is really ruthless. Pressing the painful part of his body, the muscles on Roja's face twitched a few times, and his face was helpless. Ellipsis ellipsis. 9 flowers. Just from what he feels now, there are at least bone fractures, broken muscle fibers, nerve contusions, and the rest is unknown. Fortunately, these injuries are just trivial for Roja, who has dragon blood and fragments. Enduring the pain in his body, Roja opened the storage space of the system and picked up the pieces. System: use fragment flesh regeneration. Understand: consume fragments to regenerate flesh. Tsuchimikado Yuanshan, X1. Feeling that the body function was recovering rapidly, Roja took out a clay pot from the storage space again, took out what looked like a pill, and ate it. As soon as the pill entered, bursts of warmth flowed through Roja's body, and the speed of physical regeneration more than doubled. Just a few minutes later, Roja's face turned red. As expected of the fairy beans called Dragon Ball Bug, the effect is really powerful. Satisfied, he touched himself, and Roja stood up with a carp. Casually patted the dust on his body, Roja glanced at the seawater pouring into the crack, and immediately jumped over the crack and walked in the direction of Garp. At this time, Garp had already done it, leaning on the stone behind him, looking weakly at Roja. Garp watched Roja walk towards him with a free look, and couldn't help but widen his eyes, his face full of shock. With the last blow just now, he felt the terrifying power brewed by Roja, so he didn't hold back at all, and he burst out with all his strength to meet him. Under his all-out offensive, if it was Sakazuki, Aokiji and the like, even if he would not be seriously injured, he would definitely be unable to move for a short time. Absolutely no benefit. But even any of the above, it is impossible to think that Roja is so easy now. You, not hurt. Garp made no secret of the surprise on his face. I'm injured, it's quite serious, but I'm young and strong and recover quickly. Roja chuckled, squatted in front of Garp, and poked Garp's chest. How about it, old man, you still have to reply. How long? Hey, brat, don't poke. Being stabbed in the wound by Roja, Garp took a breath and patted Roja's hand with a grin. Chapter 267 Justice. After taking Roja's hand off, Cap looked suspiciously at Roja for a long time, and finally couldn't believe it. Are you really hurt? And seriously? What are you doing? It's really hurt. I've been hurt all over my body, but I've recovered now. Roja looked at Garp with a smile, and then reached out to the clay pot in his hand. The expression on Garp's face at this time was completely indescribable with shock. If he was given a choice, he would rather Roja admit that he was only slightly injured, rather than hearing the words that Roja had recovered. Because if it is a minor injury, he can pull up a strong man like Sengoku or Zephyr, and it is possible to defeat Roja. But if he was seriously injured, and in such a short period of time, it would be terrifying. Such a terrifying recovery ability is simply invincible. Even Garp himself can think of Roja's fighting method. Do your best to kill one person with injury for injury, then roam to escape, wait for the injury to recover, and then turn back to kill. It can be said that if Roja really has such a recovery ability, Garp will not be surprised even if he singles out the naval government one day. Are all the people in your dimensional brigade monsters? Garp looked at Roja speechlessly. But at this moment, Roja suddenly stretched out his hand and handed a pill-like thing to Garp. This is? Garp asked suspiciously. Shando, you can also understand it as a magic medicine. If you eat it, you can quickly recover your combat power. That's it. Garp nodded, without hesitation, he took the fairy bean and ate it in one bite. As for Roja drugging him or something like that, Garp didn't even think about it. In this situation, as long as Roja is willing, he can kill him on the spot, so why bother? As soon as Shando entered, Garp's eyes suddenly widened, and he looked at Roja in surprise. Anything else? 10 more. No, 20 more. No, don't even think about it. Roja glanced at the funny Garp speechlessly and put away the clay pot. This old man is not shy, and the warring states can endure him for so many years, which is considered a good temper in the warring states. The despised Garp was not at all ashamed, he laughed a few times, and looked up at Roja. What are you going to do next? Or save Marco? Roja said without hesitation. Of course. Marco is a member of the Whitebeard Pirates. Your Dimensional Brigade wants to help the pirates. Hearing this, Garp frowned. If the Dimensional Brigade relies on the pirates, it will be a big trouble. You think too much. Roja shook his head. The Dimension Brigade will not rely on any force. The Dimension Brigade is the Dimension Brigade, and we ourselves represent a force. The Whitebeard Pirates. It's just to prevent life from being ruined. Roja's face turned pale and looked directly at Garp. Lieutenant Garp, do you think it was wrong for me to save Marco? Huh. Garp frowned and looked at Roja suspiciously. Roja smiled lightly and sat casually across from Garp. I know what you guys are going to do when you capture Marco. It's nothing more than public execution, laying traps, and intending to kill the living force of the Whitebeard Pirates. Of course, if you can turn against a certain cadre of the Whitebeard Pirates, give Whitebeard Pirates at a critical moment. It couldn't have been better if the beard hit the nail on the head. You. Hearing Roja's words, Garp couldn't help but widened his eyes and pointed to Roja, his face full of horror. However, when he saw Roja's laughing expression, he suddenly reacted, and his face suddenly turned black. Stinky boy, you cheated on me. Sure enough, I have already started to contact the traitors of the Whitebeard Pirates. Roja shook his head with a smile, ignoring Garp's black face. I don't want to know how you came into contact with that traitor, so I'll keep talking about it. Lieutenant General Garp, do you think that if your plan is really implemented, and if it is implemented successfully, the consequences are really what you want? This time, Garp learned his lesson and did not speak, but looked straight at Roja here, and started thinking with his few brain cells. Without making Garp think, Roja continued. First of all, after the war, both the Whitebeard Pirates and the Navy will definitely suffer heavy losses. The Navy will lose tens of thousands of elites, and tens of thousands of families will face tragedies in the world. After losing so many elites, the Navy's strength against pirates will definitely be much weaker, and more people will be harassed by pirates. As for the Whitebeard Pirates, after losing a large number of members, officials, and even Whitebeard himself, what do you think will happen to the islands and kingdoms under the Whitebeard Pirates, which are blessed by him? Garp thought for a moment, his face became more and more heavy, and finally said in a hoarse voice, Whitebeard loses his dominance, those wild dog pirates in the New World will rush up and seize the chassis, and the four emperors will intervene. The New World is in chaos, and countless ordinary people died in the strife of the pirates. Roja added the next words to Garp. But, if you don't get rid of the pirates. Garp looked anxious, as if talking, but found that he couldn't say anything. Isn't it just right for the Navy to catch pirates and kill pirates? Why would there be such a big mess to get rid of the Whitebeard Pirates? In fact, Garp already had the answer in his mind. A rival for many years, Garp knew Whitebeard very well. Big Mom and Kaido, who are also the four emperors, Whitebeard will never do the same thing as those two, who will kill people to vent their anger and destroy the city and the country. Big Mom and Kaido, in the chassis of Whitebeard's rule, as long as each kingdom keeps its own way and pays tribute regularly, the Whitebeard Pirates will bless them, and no one pirate group dares to touch its edge. Among them, Fishman Island is the most obvious example of 3.0. It is even said that some kingdoms under the rule of Whitebeard are better than some kingdoms that live under the rule of the world government. Because they don't have to face the Tianlong people, the nobles, or even the pirates who burn, kill and plunder. Garp couldn't help but fall into confusion. Seeing Garp's expression, Roja smiled lightly and stood up. I'll go first if I have something to do here. I believe we will meet again soon. Right. Before taking 2 steps, Roja seemed to remember something, and suddenly called Garp. After Garp raised his head, Roja smiled. Mr. Garp, I hope you can tell the Warring States Marshal what I said today. In addition, I have one more thing to ask him. The justice that the Navy insists is the justice of ordinary people or the justice of the world government. Chapter 268. You are in pain, I am happy. Roja left, and a few seconds after he walked into the jungle, Garp could no longer perceive Roha's breath. Although it is not known whether Roha has restrained his breath or moved in a special way, Garp also has no intention of exploring. For a long time, although Garp himself did not say it clearly, everyone in the world, whether it was himself or his navy companions, regarded him and Sengoku as the pillars of existence. The Warring States period is wisdom, and Garp is strength. As for Sakazuki and Kizaru, in their eyes, they are just children who need to grow up. The reason why Sakazuki and others are so famous is because of the intentional planning of the Warring States period to downplay the reputation of the two and build momentum for the new generation. Otherwise, Garp alone can cover up all the light of Sakazuki and others. However, today, the pillars have collapsed, and they are still being crushed with absolute strength. For a long time, Garp, who thought that he could protect the new generation and isolate all dangers, suddenly found that his strength was not enough. This situation made Garp feel very uncomfortable, especially Roha was so young, and he looked like 20 years old when he looked at it. Even if Garp's heart beat again, it would inevitably be a heavy blow. For a stubborn person like Garp, if he wants to restore his mentality, it is nothing more than eating, drinking, and having fun, and Garp is going to play a lot now. Among the many pleasures of Garp, there are two that rank very high. The first is to beat someone up with a hearty meal. The second is to build happiness on the suffering of others. Originally, with Garp's strength, it was very difficult to achieve these two pleasures. In the Navy, they are all his juniors. If he were to fight, he would not be able to fight. If you go to find the pirates, the whereabouts of the pirates are erratic, and before finding the target, Garp's mood is already good. It is really unnecessary. Fortunately, though, today there was a target not far from him and easy to find. Standing up, Garp shook the dust on his body at will, laughed wickedly, and then rushed into the distance like a bull. At the edge of his perception, there was a figure that was rapidly moving away. Virgo. Even though he was seriously injured and unable to move just now, Garp sensed Virgo's killing intent. At first, he thought that Virgo wanted to take this opportunity to kill Roha and solve the problem for the Navy. However, after Virgo got closer, Garp really realized that Virgo's killing intent included him. Traitor, traitor, murder your boss. Various words kept echoing in Garp's mind, although Garp couldn't understand for a while what was Virgo's reason for wanting to kill him. But he didn't think about it any further, because why use your brain when you can solve it with your hands? As long as you catch Virgo, everything will be solved. That's exactly how Garp has, all along, solved the problem. Even if he was beaten all over, Garp didn't want to use his brain, he was so willful. On the other hand, Roha also rushed to the island where the Don Quixote family and CP0 fought. Standing above the sky, Roha had a panoramic view of the island below. How come these two guys are not light or heavy? Looking at the tragic state of the island, Roha couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. The island below, no, maybe it shouldn't be called an island. The small island of dozens of square kilometers has been broken into 3 parts and dozens of small parts at this time, and the area has also shrunk a lot. That is because the attack has lowered the height around the island and caused seawater to erode. On the edge of the island, there are still cliffs and gravel falling, and the beach is engulfed by the sea. Inside the island, unfathomable cracks were gradually filled with seawater, and several huge potholes had been turned into small lakes. Destroyed like this, you don't have to think about it, and it won't be long before this small island will be engulfed by the waves and completely disappear into the sea. Looking left and right, Roha saw the golden boat hovering in the air at a glance. Hooked the corner of his mouth, and in the next second, Roha appeared on the golden boat. Roha. Gilgamesh, who had already seen Roha, stood up from the throne and nodded lightly. Noticing Gilgamesh's frowning eyes when he saw the sand under his feet, Roha smirked in his heart and stomped his feet again. The sand on the shoes suddenly fell on the deck of the golden boat. Gilgamesh's expression became even more ugly. Originally, he flew into the sky because he disliked the dirty and messy place below. Who would have thought that Roha would come back and shake the soil on his boat? This is Roha, and if there is another person, Gilgamesh should reveal the treasure of the king and slap the other party into a sieve. How's the situation? Noticing Gilgamesh's gloomy face, Roha curled the corners of his mouth and asked. The guy named Marco has been rescued, and the people of the Don Quixote family are below, guarded by Accelerator. Gilgamesh sat back on the throne, bowed his head, and shook the 023 wine glass in his hand. Stop looking at the sand on the deck. That's right. Roha nodded, then suddenly remembered the report of the android just now, turned his head and asked, didn't you say there are people from CP0? That group of screeching guys are dead. Gilgamesh replied casually. Hearing this, Roha frowned and glanced at Gilgamesh, then shook his head with a wry smile. You don't have to think about it. It must be the people in CP0 who annoy Gilgamesh, and then kill him. It seems that in the future, Gilgamesh should be asked to do things clearly. This guy's temper is really bad. Go to the next location. When you get there, someone in the shadow will tell you the target. Roha commanded, and immediately disappeared in Gilgamesh's eyes. It was not until Roha left and drank the red wine in the glass that Gilgamesh raised his head and glanced at the sand on the ground in disgust. After raising his hand to manipulate the magic, forming a whirlwind, and completely blowing the sand off the deck, Gilgamesh nodded in satisfaction. Taking out the map, Gilgamesh manipulated the golden boat to leave. At the same time, Roha finally saw Marco, who made himself a lot of trouble. Chapter 269 Life for Life. On the only remaining highland on the island, a group of people scattered here and there, divided into two factions. The Don Quixote family gathered on the right, surrounded the seriously injured Doflamingo, with a worried expression on their faces. The androids in black armor constantly wandered around, setting up defenses, looking at the Don Quixote family with vigilant eyes from time to time. On the highlands, the most leisurely ones are Accelerator, who sits on a tree and reads comics, and Marco, who sits under a tree and eats Hess. Seeing Roha appear, everyone looked different. The androids saluted in unison, Accelerator jumped down from the tree, and nodded to Roha. As for the people of the Don Quixote family, they looked at Roha with a complicated expression. Marco hurriedly swallowed his food, stood up hastily, and walked towards Roha. Thank you. Marco walked to Roha and bowed deeply to Roha. If there is anything in the future, as long as it will not endanger the Whitebeard pirates, please do whatever you want. As a member of the Whitebeard pirates, except for Marco, who has the highest status in Whitebeard, he has seen farther than others. Naturally, he is very clear about the price that Roha paid for saving him, and the meaning it represents. Saving him is equivalent to avoiding it once, and a full-scale battle between the Whitebeard pirates and the Navy is equivalent to saving the lives of countless members of the Whitebeard pirates. How could Marco, who regards his companions as his relatives, not be grateful to Roha? In his heart, Roha's kindness cannot be repaid even with his life. Get up, I'll talk about this later. Roha helped Marco up, and after a few greetings, he instructed Accelerator to send Marco to the nearest Whitebeard pirate's ship. Then, Roha walked towards the Don Quixote family. Seeing Roha coming, the people facing Roha quickly stood up and silently protected Doflamingo. Even the younger Buffalo and Baby Five ran over nervously and stood beside the crowd. Everyone looked like they were going to die. Roha, sir, can you please let the young master go? If you let the young master go, my life in Diamante will be yours. I will go through fire and water, and I will do whatever it takes. Even if you ask me to assassinate the 5 elders. Star, I'm willing to. Diamante, who was standing at the front, held back the fear in his heart and trembled. Me too, I am Rauji, willing to use my life for the life of the young master. I, Gradius, do too. Torapal, yes. P_V. I am Mahabe, and I am willing. The members of the Don Quixote family, as if they had negotiated, took a step forward in unison, staring at Roja with a complicated expression. Kai. Tilda C. You. Cough. You guys. Get out of here, I don't need you to save. Brother Doflamming, who was behind everyone, turned to his side, roaring excitedly. Tears glistened faintly in his eyes. Even Roja did not expect members of the Don Quixote family to do such a thing. Shaking his head, Roja smiled with admiration. Doflamingo's technique of manipulating people, even he has to obey. Baby, I've gotten a little fat recently. Baby 5 feet's small face in front of him. Roja raised his head when he saw the other person's face flushed and humming with anger. Get out of the way, I'm not interested in you guys. I want to talk to Doflamingo about something. But, you. Diamante hesitated. Diamante, go. Doflamingo behind him interrupted Diamante unceremoniously, but when he saw everyone's worried eyes, his tone couldn't help softening. Don't worry, there's no need to lie to you. If he really wanted to kill me, Accelerator would have already done it, and it's impossible for me to survive. At this time, the talents of the Don Quixote family no longer insisted, and silently walked into the distance under the surveillance of the android. When he really saw Doflamingo, Roja was still surprised. In his impression, Doflamingo has always been synonymous with strength and domineering. Even if he is defeated by Luffy in the original book and taken away by the Navy, he will not change his color. But now, at this moment, Doflamingo was wrapped in white cloth, his face was pale, blood and sand were mixed together, and he was in a state of embarrassment. The only constant is Doflamingo's unruly face. What are you going to talk about? Even as a prisoner and defeated, Doflamingo's tone didn't feel weak. So confident, I won't kill you. Roja smiled lightly and sat next to Brother Doflamingo. Your confidence comes from the explosive rock you hid. Speaking of which, I really didn't see Buffalo, who is your choice to guard the last trump card. So what? Doflamingo said bluntly. Roja's eyes fluctuated for a while, and then the corners of his mouth twitched, and a strange light appeared in his eyes. If so, I don't mind manipulating your spirit and letting you tell me where the explosive rock is hidden. You. This time Doflamingo couldn't keep his composure anymore, closed his eyes in panic, turned his head away, and stopped looking into Roja's eyes. Ha ha ha, just kidding, with your strength, mind control doesn't work anymore. Roja laughed, reached out and patted Doflamingo, causing Doflamingo to twitch in pain. Doflamingo. When the pain on his body dissipated, Doflamingo said with difficulty, you are here to play with me. What's the matter? Even if he opened his mouth to speak, Doflamingo didn't open his eyes, and he didn't turn his head, he was very vigilant. There are things, but before that, you have to listen to me first, my thoughts on the world, or my plans. Roja put away his laughing expression, his face was stern, and he slowly told Doflamingo about his plan. At first, Doflamingo didn't have any fluctuations, but when Roja said more and more, he suddenly turned his head and looked at Roja in shock. Before he knew it, Roja had already said everything he could tell Doflamingo. When Roja finished speaking, Doflamingo remained motionless and closed his eyes silently. After a full 10 minutes, Doflamingo said in a hoarse tone, why did you tell me? Because, if you were there, some important link would be easy to accomplish. Link. Doflamingo frowned and thought, and then he let out a deep breath, his face was tired. Chapter 270 Magical Leadership. You just believe that I will agree to you and agree to your plan. Doflamingo looked up at Roja, his face extremely flat. Why don't you agree to something that is beneficial and harmless? Roja asked rhetorically with a smile. Doflamingo was silent for a while, then nodded. Deal. Okay, it's easy to talk to smart people, then I'll tell you about the specific arrangements now. Roja's face showed a faint smile, and he told it again. This time, the two talked for half an hour. Finally, Roja fed a fairy bean to Doflamingo and stood up. Then, that's the deal. Yeah, Doflamingo nodded solemnly, but there was no joy on his face because his injury had improved. A few minutes later, Doflamingo stood up gloomily and walked towards the Don Quixote family. Young master. Young master, how are you? Young master, what did that Roja say to you? Seeing that Doflamingo, who couldn't move just now, was limping towards them now, everyone in the Don Quixote family was surprised and gathered around Doflamingo to greet them. I'm fine, we'll leave in a minute. Brother Doflamingo waved his hand, and immediately looked at BABY5. BABY5, you don't have to follow us with 313. From now on, you can follow Roja. What? What happened to the young master? Why did you suddenly let Baby 5 go with that guy? That's right, young master, what's going on? When they heard that they were going to give up Baby 5, everyone in the Don Quixote family was not calm. Diamante frowned. Is this part of the deal? That's right. Doflamingo nodded. Baby 5, who was standing beside her, fanned her long eyelashes, her eyes were already glistening with tears, her mouth was flattened, and she looked like she was about to cry. Young master, don't you want Baby 5 anymore? Baby 5 sobbed. No, Roja needs you more than me. Doflamingo replied patiently, but a strange feeling inevitably rose in his heart. No matter how dangerous the task Roja gave him was, there was no need to pick out Baby 5 on purpose. Could it be that that guy, as rumored, is a pedophile? No matter what Doflamingo thinks, since the conditions have been negotiated, it is no longer up to him to decide the matter. Back quote. Not long after IJ Accelerator returned, the Don Quixote family, Accelerator, and a dozen android warriors left the island. Standing on the boat X looking at the island in the distance, Doflamingo seemed to see the figure of Roja. Win-win. Hee. For some reason, Doflamingo's face was full of sadness after he realized his enlightenment. Until many years later, no one knew how Roja convinced Doflamingo, who was known as a hero, on the island that had disappeared for many years, and what kind of mentality Doflamingo was in. Down, forcibly reversed himself, and accepted Roja's conditions. Things about this day were completely buried in history under Roja's instruction. The only thing the world can understand is that from this day onwards, Doflamingo cancelled, carefully prepared, and planned to win Dressrosa, and completely disappeared in front of the world. It was not until the last day of the old era that Doflamingo ended his tragic life in a gesture that no one could imagine. On the island, Roja watched the Don Quixote family's boat disappear from the sea before turning around and scanning the surroundings. Looking at the surrounding islands, Roja always felt something was missing. He didn't remember until a few minutes later. What the heck, Marco found it. Where's Blackbeard? Where's Blackbeard? Roja called an android and asked. Sir, before we arrived, the 4 companions who followed Lord Gilgamesh found a suspected Blackbeard figure and marked it, but after the 4 of them were killed in battle, the figure of Blackbeard was never found again. Quote. Let him slip away. Roja curled his lips, and then asked again, have the data of the fallen comrades been saved? Bring them to me. Yes. With that said, the android warrior hurriedly left and ran towards his companions. After a while, 4 long metal blocks like U-discs were handed over to Roja. This is a memory module placed in the artificial human armor. It is connected with the artificial human thinking through the special function on the armor, and can record all the memory, emotional changes, thinking and other mental activities of the artificial human for a period of time. Integrate this memory module with all the memory modules of the artificial human that have been saved before in Skynet, and then input it into the blank artificial human brain to complete the resurrection of the artificial human. Carefully put away the module, Roja looked up at the androids waiting for the order. You don't have to go back to the capital of the 7 waters. Go directly to the site where the beast pirates used to be. Gilgamesh has already gone first, and you will cooperate with the shadow work there. As early as when the beast pirates were completely wiped out, Roja wanted to take over the chassis of the beast's pirates. In desperation, we can only send a group of shadow members to roughly control it. Today, with the annihilation of the beast pirates and the weak control of the Dimensional Brigade, the order in that area is on the verge of collapse, and new troops are needed. Roha believes that sending these 500 androids, coupled with the strength of Gilgamesh, will definitely be able to completely suppress that area. As for Gilgamesh being grumpy, maverick, and whether he will manage it well, Roha is not worried. Most people's impression of Gilgamesh is nothing more than the oldest king, golden glitter, stray sword, king's treasure, golden law, arrogance, indifference and the like. But few people will remember Gilgamesh's retained skills, one of which is leadership, A+. The legendary Gilgamesh has an excellent ability to command a large army, and because of this, he is also praised as the best king. Authors Qin Shi Huang, Li Shimin, etc. Said he. In the Moon world, if you want to rule a kingdom, you only need B-level leadership. A+ level leadership that Gilgamesh possesses has entered a magical level. Having reached this state, Gilgamesh's ability has surpassed human expectations or technology, and can be called magic. As long as he is under his leadership, the morale and ability of his army will be greatly improved. After finishing everything, Roha is also ready to return to the Seven Waters. The matter here is almost over, he just has to wait now. Wait until everything is set up. And most importantly, Lelouch is coming to an end, and it's time for a new comic. Chapter 271 What to Draw. City of Seven Waters. Roha led the somewhat depressed Baby 5 to the front of the house. Looking at Baby 5's sullen look, Roha shook his head helplessly. What Doflamingo is going to do next is really too dangerous, and even Roha doesn't know if it can be successful. Worried that Baby 5 would die because of this, Roha asked her from Doflamingo. As for the life and death of the rest of the Don Quixote family, Roha never thought about it. Don't look at their loyalty to Doflamingo, but everyone has countless blood on their hands. Even Doflamingo knows this, but he can't do anything. If he wants to live, he can only follow Roha's orders. Accelerator, who stayed by Doflamingo's side, was not only to help Doflamingo to complete the task, but also the person in charge of supervision. As early as when he was instructing Accelerator, Roha faced Doflamingo in front of him and told Accelerator that as long as Doflamingo dared to do anything weird, don't hesitate to act immediately and destroy the entire Don Quixote family member. There is no way. Doflamingo is too cunning, and it is impossible to guard against it. In order to avoid the expansion of losses, Roha can only use this stupidest method. Thinking of this, Roha suddenly recalled Doflamingo's bitter face at that time, and couldn't help but chuckle. Roha, brother. Baby 5 looked up suspiciously, and was a little uncomfortable with this title. Okay, let's go in. Roha said as he pushed open the door. I also have a little girl about the same size as you, called Sha Tang. You have to get along well with her in the future. Please, please. Roha made a funny gesture to Baby 5. Yeah, I have to say, Baby has absolutely no resistance to words like I'm begging you and needing you. After listening to Roha's words, Baby 5 nodded quickly with a happy look on his face. Walking into the house, unexpectedly, there were two people in the hall. Sitting on the sofa, Kuroko Shirai and Sugar were holding a comic book together. Roha. Brother Roha, you are back. As soon as he saw Roha, Sugar immediately jumped off the sofa, ran over with bare feet, rushed into Roha's arms, and entangled Roha like an octopus. Oh, the sugar is sinking again. Roha weighed the sugar and said with a smile. HMPH. I'm not fat, I've grown taller. Sugar wrinkled her delicate little nose and twisted on Roha reluctantly. Okay, I have grown taller and taller, and I will grow as tall as my sister in the future. Roha patted Sugar's back lovingly and hugged Sugar. Come on, let me introduce to you. This young lady is Baby 5, you two should get along well in the future. Sugar looked at the Baby 5 hiding behind Roha, and looked at Roha again. The big black eyes rolled around. I don't know what I remembered, and nodded happily. Good. Letting Sugar and Baby 5 get to know each other, Roha looked at Kuroko Shirai who had been standing beside him. "How are you doing?" "It's all right." Kuroko Shirai twitched his fingers nervously, looking like he didn't want to say anything. Roha raised his eyebrows, sat on the sofa beside Shirai Kuroko, and his legs accidentally touched the white tender calf under Shirai Kuroko's short skirt. "Yeah, what are you doing so close?" Shirai Kuroko exclaimed, and quickly stepped back, her face turning redder and brighter. "The sofa is here, I don't want to sit here." Roha hooked his mouth and looked at Kuroko Shirai. "What's the matter? Are you worried?" Hearing Roha mention this, Shirai Kuroko stopped stirring his fingers, looked up at Roha, and hurriedly lowered his head again, and after a while, he spoke hesitantly. Can I join your organization, the mysterious organization that always comes to my house?" "You mean Shadow?" Roha frowned. "What are you doing with them?" I want to find something to do." Saying that, Kuroko Shirai didn't know what decision he had made in his heart, suddenly raised his head and looked straight at Roha. "I don't want to be a cripple, I want to help you too. Although my fighting ability is not as strong as my elder sister, and I can't go to the research institute to help, but, I'm already very powerful now. 9 flowers. Saying that, Shirai Kuroko patted the dagger hanging from his waist and raised his head slightly. "Recently, I learned a bit of swordsmanship with that uncle who had a cold face all day long and was pure and white, and defeated a few pirate groups. I feel that my current strength is enough to help you." A clean uncle. Roha didn't react for a while, and it took a while to remember. Isn't what Kuroko Shirai said is Hawkeye? Thinking of the domineering eagle eyes, actually in the eyes of Shirai Kuroko, is a white uncle, Roha couldn't help laughing. You, what are you laughing at?" Kuroko Shirai finally mustered up his courage, and when Roha laughed, he lost most of his laughter at once. Feeling ridiculed, Kuroko Shirai pulled out his short knife and began to draw with his claws and claws. "If you don't believe me, you can try it yourself. That uncle has said that my ability is combined with the swordsmanship of close-range raids, and the actual combat ability is very strong." Looking at Shirai Kuroko, who was pouting and bulging like a small beast, Roha waved his hand quickly. Don't try, I trust you." What a joke. Don't look at Shirai Kuroko's temper now, but it's because of the influence of the black mole of love. In fact, Kuroko is still the naughty, thick-skinned, arrogant and domineering guy. I really want to annoy her. Just the fact that she harassed her with teleportation every day is enough for Roha. Anyway, after promising Kuroko to let her participate in the trial of entering the shadows for a while, Roha sent Kuroko away. As soon as he returned to the room, Roha lazily waded onto the bed and exhaled a long breath, feeling a little tired. Although the injury after the battle with Karp has completely recovered, the mental match is still inevitable. While resting, Roha opened the interface for storing comics in the system. What is good to draw? Looking at the system interface, a tangled look appeared on Roha's face. To this day, he has drawn more than a dozen comics that he did not draw, and each of them is a masterpiece, which is really confusing. Chapter 272 Naruto. Well, now I have all the comics I keep. Dragon Ball. This won't work. Attack on Titan. The power system is too low to be useful. Sword Art Online. Forget it, or wait until the Skynet function is upgraded and can create a virtual world before drawing. It is estimated that it will be better by then. On the system interface, Roha picked for more than 10 minutes, and he couldn't make a decision. The power he has now is enough to allow him to complete his future plans, and there is not much demand for fan points. The reason why he wants to draw comics is just for future considerations. Just in need. Each of the dozen or so comics in front of him is deeply loved by him and can bring him a lot of fan value, so Roha is very entangled. At the end, Roha scratched his head in distress, simply didn't choose, and closed his eyes. System, draw me a comic right away. Understood. The system's icy voice sounded in his mind, and the next second, the sound of the extraction completed reappeared in Roha's mind. Opening his eyes, when Roha saw the cartoon in front of him, he couldn't help but be stunned. The cover of the comic shows a teenage boy dressed in orange, with blonde hair and blue eyes, and 6 whisker-like textures on his cheeks. Looking at Naruto Uzumaki's running figure and cheerful smile, Roha shook his head helplessly. It's actually Naruto, forget it. Although I really don't want to draw such a terrifyingly long comic, but since I got it, Roha doesn't bother to change it. At his current drawing speed, it will take a little more time to draw Naruto, but it is still within an acceptable range. Actually, when you think about it, Naruto is not bad. The high-end power is much higher than that of Pirate World, and there is also a water escape, the ultimate killer for capable people, which is also a good choice. If only I could draw some high-end characters. Let's not mention the combat ability first, just the endless ninjutsu is very exciting. If you get an illusionist like Uchiha Itachi, Skynet's upgrade can also speed up the pace. The thoughts in his mind continued to diverge, and Roha couldn't help laughing when he remembered that he was about to be able to obtain the things in the Naruto world. Ninjutsu or something, it's much more cool than holding a knife and shaking a fist. Thinking of the appearance of wearing a reincarnation eye, the golden wheel in his left hand, and the immortal spiral pill in his right hand, at incarnation of a fairy body P with a circle of begging jade behind him, Roha couldn't help laughing a few times, and hurriedly started painting. As one of the 3 major migrant manga, Naruto's painting volume is second only to the Conan he painted before. Just when Roha was in retreat and creating with peace of mind, the Holy Land Marijoa fell into mourning. Just last night, the patriarch of the Ekijime family of the Tianlong people, known as the Pillar of the Tianlong people and the chairman of the Tianlong Council, died of a heart attack. In the Ekijime family, white cloths were hung everywhere, and everyone's face was gray. Charlene Ekijime, the next patriarch of the Ekijime family, looked sad and did not have the slightest joy in inheriting a dragon family. As the eldest son of Saint Ekijime, although he is not as resourceful as Saint Ekijime, he still has a sense of himself. With his ability, he could not maintain it at all. The Ekijime family's aloof status among the Tianlong people, I believe that some people will do bad things to the Ekijime family soon. Even Charlie Enshung has heard that several families have united and are ready to seize the position of the chairman of the Tianlong People's Council in one fell swoop. Charlie's heart was already in a mess, and he lowered his head and sat in front of his father's coffin, silent. But at this moment, someone suddenly tapped him on the shoulder. "Saint Charlie, don't be too sad." The kind and amiable business came from behind. Hearing this voice, Charlie Enshung shuddered and turned around in a hurry. When he saw the person behind him, he revealed a surprised voice. "Saint Roswald, are you here too?" "Oh, of course I'm here. As the junior of Saint Ekijime, how could I not come?" Saint Roswald sighed deeply, and his eyes flashed. "Speaking of which, a few days ago, I negotiated with Lord Ichijime, and I came back to visit him in the past few days, but I didn't expect. Speaking of the end, Roswald Saint even covered his face and cried bitterly, and the cry was so loud that it even infected Charlie N. Saint beside him. Although Saint Charlene's eyes were red because of Saint Roswald's cry, a little bit of joy gradually rose in his heart. The death of Saint Ekijime has reshuffled the forces among the Tianlong people, and several families that were once dominated by the Ekijime family have also begun to waver. This can be seen from the fact that they only sent their juniors to come to observe a moment of silence. Charlie Enshung saw it in his eyes, and his heart was anxious, but without the support of a strong character, he couldn't make any waves by himself. But it's different now. Saint Roswald, the rising star among the heavenly dragons, actually came here in person. This move is tantamount to showing his attitude, proving that Saint Roswald is still supporting the Ekijime family. In other words, the Ekijime family still has a chance. Thinking of this, Saint Charlene's eyes fluctuated for a while, and then he hugged Saint Roswald and began to cry. The two cried for a long time, and finally Rosward Saint comforted Charlene Saint a few words before leaving 3.7 weekly. Before leaving, Saint Roswald also patted Charlie's shoulder and said earnestly, "Charlie's Saint, don't worry, although I am not a good person, I am most concerned with gratitude and repayment. Saint Chijin gave me so much help and teaching I will never forget. Leave the grass to me, and I will definitely help you keep it, the glory of the Edgejim family." After finishing speaking, Saint Roswald left, leaving behind a tear-stained, but excited-looking Charlie and Saint. After walking out of the courtyard and entering the carriage, Saint Rosward took out a handkerchief and gently wiped his tears. When he put down the handkerchief, there was no trace of grief on his face, replaced by a full of sarcasm. Chapter 273 Poseidon. Hey, that old fox of Edgejim, who counts the heavens and the earth, makes a plan, what happened in the end? Isn't the bamboo basket empty? I just got a little herbal medicine, and the old guy died. His vigilance is really poor. Having a son, but still a waste, just relying on that kind of idiot, but also want to stand on the heads of many Tianlong people. It's ridiculous. After a while of wanton ridicule, Saint Roswald sat in the carriage, closed his eyes, and began to think as best he could. He is sure to control the several Tianlong families under the Ekijin family, and under him, there are two other Tianlong families who have clearly wanted to move closer to him. In this case, he has been able to control for nearly half a day the wishes of the dragon family. Next, it's time to think about how to make Saint Charlene a puppet and complete the plan of Lord God. Thinking of Roha's subpoena to him some time ago in 08, Saint Roswald inevitably had a headache. It was easier said than done to expel all the common people and slaves in Mary Joan. Before I knew it, half an hour had passed. Glancing at the pocket watch, Saint Roswald couldn't help frowning, looking unhappy. It was supposed to take 10 minutes to get home, how come it hasn't arrived after half an hour? Just when Saint Roswald was about to scold the coachman, the carriage suddenly stopped. Immediately after the door was opened, a woman in enchanting clothes swayed into the carriage. "How did you get in? Where's the driver?" Roswald Saint suddenly shouted sharply, and stretched his hand into his arms vigilantly. However, after seeing the sign language displayed by the other party, the nervous look on Saint Roswald's face immediately dissipated, replaced by a respectful look. "Lord God has another mission," Saint Roswald asked respectfully. "Go to the outside of Mary Joa. There are a few people who need you to come in," the woman in enchanting clothes ordered in a cold voice that did not match her clothes. "Yes," Saint Roswald nodded quickly. The carriage started again and headed out of Marijoa. A few days later, the capital of Seven Waters. Roha, who has been retreating and drawing comics, came to the institute non-stop after receiving the report from the institute. As soon as he entered the research institute, Yashang Tianjing, who had been waiting here for a long time, greeted him with a smile on his face. "Poseidon's genetic crack is completed. What's the result?" Roha asked impatiently without waiting for Tianjing Yashang to speak. The genetic hack was a success. Tianjing Yashang took Roha towards the institute, with a mysterious smile on his face. "Poseidon's genetic cracking results will definitely give you a big surprise. But let me sell it first, and you'll know when I get to the place and see the research results." "Mysterious, let's go, I can't wait." Roha raised his eyebrows and hurriedly followed Tianjing Yashang towards the interior of the institute. All the way to the testing ground at the bottom of the research institute, the two stopped. Under the ground floor of the testing ground, there is a huge hole that was specially opened up. In the hollow, it was already filled with seawater, and all kinds of fish could be seen. It was even said that Roha saw a shark. At the bottom, there are common things in the sea such as seagrass, sand, and conch. This cave has resolutely achieved a small marine ecosystem. Can you say what happened to Poseidon's genes this time? Roha looked at Yashang Tianjing on the side. Of course you can, but before that, I'd like to ask the grown-ups to take a look at our experimental results. Tianjing Yashang smiled, and then snapped his fingers. The next moment, the door on the other side of the test site opened, and a huge glass water tank was pushed out by the artificial man. Roha's eyes widened when he saw the creatures in the tank. Fish 413 people. Did you catch a murloc? Roha said subconsciously, but soon he noticed the difference in the murloc and shook his head. No, this is an artificial human. An artificial murloc. Seeing this, Roha had a faint hunch in his heart, but he wasn't sure, so he couldn't help but look curiously at Yashang Tianjing beside him. Sir, the next moment is to witness the miracle. Tianjing Yashang smiled mysteriously. Immediately, Tianjing Yashang nodded at the android in the distance. Roha vaguely saw what the artificial man said to the artificial murloc. The next moment, the artificial murloc no longer swam at will, but swam to the edge of the water tank, close to the side of the underground void, and stared at the void. The entire testing ground fell silent, and everyone couldn't help but hold their breaths without making a sound. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Suddenly, in the void, there was a rushing sound of water, and a small silverfish gradually put its head out of the water and looked straight at the artificial murloc. Chapter 274 Devil Fruit and Poseidon. The changes in the water are far more than that. After the shaped fish surfaced, all kinds of fish in the hollow probed one after another. At the end, along with the surging of the water, a shark actually surfaced. This is... Roha raised his brows and glanced at the artificial murloc in the sink with a little interest. In Roha's perception, it can be felt that the artificial murloc is exuding bursts of special energy fluctuations, spreading around. In those abnormal fish, the energy fluctuation is more obvious. You can already replicate Poseidon's power. Roha looked at Tianjing Yashang in disbelief. It's just an infinitely weakened version. The control over fish is still very weak. The range is only a few hundred meters, and there is no way to manipulate the Sea Kings. Tianjing Yashang pushed his eyes and said humbly, but in his face was full of pride. This is very powerful. At this time, Roha looked at the artificial mermaid, as if looking at a treasure that had not been opened, and the light was shining. Even if it can only control a few sharks or other small and medium-sized fish, it is an extremely powerful force in this world dominated by naval warfare. The most important thing is that the artificial murlocs can completely reach mass production. At that time, Roha will have a sea beast troop that can come and go freely in the sea, and even say that if you develop it further, it will be a Sea King troop. Thinking about it further, the Sea Kings of the whole world will be controlled by him, and the seas of the whole world will belong to Roha. Pirate raid. Warships patrolling. Merchant ships. Have to ask what Roha means. Stay away. Can it be mass-produced? Roha asked impatiently. In the case of mass production, of course, it is possible, but because of the particularity of the ability, I am afraid that it will take the resources of more than 10 ability artificial humans to produce a weakened version of the Poseidon artificial murloc. It's acceptable. Roha nodded. Such an ability, the combat power in the sea, has surpassed all the capable humanoids that can be produced today. The strategic significance is even more extraordinary, the production difficulties are understandable, and it is still within the acceptance range of Roha. The principle. Stay away. Tianjing Yashang sold out and smiled brightly. Sir, you must have never imagined it. Come on, what are you selling to me? Roha scolded with a smile. Tianjing Yashang smiled faintly began to explain to Roha. Just the first sentence threw a big bomb into Roha's mind. This the so-called power of Poseidon is actually the same as the power of devil fruit. Hearing this, Roha raised his brows, and his face suddenly turned cold. Continue, Roha said lightly, and began to think in his mind. In the introduction of Yashang Tianjing, Roha finally figured out the source of Poseidon's power and the research between Poseidon and devil fruit. In the essence of power, the power of Poseidon and the power of devil fruit are exactly the same, both use superpowers through a special gene. However, unlike the power of the devil fruit, Poseidon's special genes already possess inherited characteristics. That is to say, all those who have Poseidon's special genes may awaken the power of Poseidon. Of course, according to Tianjing Yashang's analysis, Poseidon's genetic inheritance is not complete, and it is extremely secretive, and it is very difficult to awaken its power. An awakened one will appear. Hearing this, Roha's brows were even tighter. Tianjing Yashang's analysis coincides with the record of a Poseidon only appearing in the history of the Murlocs for hundreds of years. In the testing field, the artificial man pushed the tank containing the artificial Murloc with interest, left the testing field, and closed the door. Tianjing Yashang's narrative continues. After half an hour, Tianjing Yashang stopped, picked up the water glass beside him, and drank water. Roha pondered for a moment, then raised his head and asked, "That is to say, Poseidon's gene is likely to belong to the superior sequence of the devil fruit. It belongs to the devil fruit that can manipulate water creatures. Are the two fundamentally the same thing? It's true that Poseidon's genetic code is very similar to that of a devil fruit, and more. And the extra part, according to my analysis with Vegapunk and Gage, is likely to eliminate the water-fearing effect of the devil fruit, as well as the genetic sequence. However, Poseidon's genes may not be complete enough. If it is me, it should be confirmed that it is 100% inherited before it is fully completed." Hearing this, Roha breathed a sigh of relief and looked straight at Yashang Tianjing. That is to say, devil fruit and Poseidon are likely to be products of genetic technology. The Murlocs may also be the products of genetic technology to cultivate the Poseidon gene, but for some reason, before the cultivation was completed, the original Murlocs left the place where they were cultivated, fled into the sea, and reproduced to this day. Tianjing Yashang added with a heavy expression. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy, and both of them thought of the explosive rock they had obtained before, and the technological civilization that used the explosive rock. Everything points to that civilization: Murlocs, devil fruits, Poseidon. Most likely it's their product. You really gave me a big surprise. After a while, Roha chuckled and shook his head. The trump card of the world government is really increasing. But so what? With a chuckle in his heart, a confident smile appeared on Roha's face again. The chess pieces have been laid out, and the destruction of the world government has become a settlement. As long as they do not have the power to destroy the planet, the rest is just a matter of more effort for Roha. By the way, I heard that Aeolia has brought Pluto back. Roha asked suddenly. Oh, it's back. He's been researching recently. Tianjing Yashang scratched his head a little embarrassedly, but because Hades is related to weapon technology, Gage and I are both researching androids and genes, Bebe. Although Garpunk has a wide range of research, his foundation is too poor, so the three of us can't help much, so let him do his own research. Weapon technology. Roha raised his eyebrows. Take me to see. Chapter 275 Pluto and the Confused World Government. Pluto, one of the three ancient weapons, is a super warship built by the capital of Seven Waters, and is known as the worst warship in the history of shipbuilding. According to legend, Pluto can destroy an island with one shot, and the power is extremely terrifying. However, in modern times, Pluto has completely disappeared, and no one knows that it is buried there. It is even said that the design drawing of Pluto, which is said to be preserved in the Seven Waters, has also disappeared. It's just that today, Pluto and Pluto's design finally resurfaced and appeared together. However, the appearance of Pluto was somewhat different from Roha's imagination. Look at the steel ruins piled up like a hill in front of you, and the huge gun barrel with a length of more than 20 meters and a diameter of 1,200 millimeters. Going forward and touching the gun barrel full of steel smoke, Roha's face couldn't help but look surprised. 1,200 millimeters, what is that concept? Even in Roha's previous life, battleships with large caliber artillery attacks and heavy armor protection, the caliber of main guns were mostly around 400 millimeters, and those with more than 500 millimeters were very rare, and this cannon actually reached at 1,200 millimeters. It is simply a giant among naval guns. This 193 giant artillery, the recoil generated by each launch is even more terrifying. If you put it on a wooden sailboat that is commonly used by pirates now, and shoot it down, no matter how much damage it hits the target, the deck of the sailboat carrying the artillery will be smashed by the recoil. The whole ship could sink directly. It's a big guy, isn't it? I don't know when. Aeolia came behind Roja, looking at the giant artillery, with a gentle face, like looking at his own child. Seeing this big guy makes me even more curious about what Pluto looks like. Roja patted the barrel, turned around, and asked, "Where's Pluto?" "That is Hades." Eoria smiled and pointed to the steel ruins beside her. "Pluto is an ironclad." Roja couldn't help frowning. He hadn't heard that the capital of Seven Waters had the ability to manufacture ironclad ships at that time. Otherwise, the pirates would not be able to use wooden sailboats uniformly. When I first saw it, I was also taken aback. I didn't expect this world to be able to build an ironclad ship so early. But maybe it's because it's been put on hold for too long. The ship has disintegrated, and the energy transmission equipment has been damaged. If you want to restore it, it will take a long time, and we may not be able to provide it with the energy it needs to fire. Quote. Energy. Roja raised his brows and looked at Eoria suspiciously. "Oh, look at me, I forgot to tell you." Aeolia patted her forehead and smiled embarrassedly. The Pluto ship, except for the basic navigation equipment, is completely filled with a lot of energy inside. The pipelines, transmission and distribution equipment are filled, and it can be said that the whole ship is in the service of that cannon. Then how it attacks? Energy weapons. I don't know what they are, but they definitely don't launch physical shells. Aeolia affirmed. Hearing this, Roja couldn't help walking to the front of the gun barrel, and the probe looked inside the gun barrel. Sure enough, the inside of the gun barrel is not as smooth and flat as the normal projectiles, but there are a large number of small devices with different shapes. Because of the old facilities, the protruding circuits are also present within the barrel. Just looking at such a cannon barrel, Roja can imagine how high-end technology the race that made this cannon has. This is the world in which he lived in his previous life, something that cannot be made even if it develops for hundreds of years. How long does it take to recover? Roja patted the cannon body fondly. Battleship cannons have always been a man's romance. Roja couldn't wait to see some more. This cannon, should be the power of an energy cannon. If everything goes well, at least. Eoria thought for a while, then shook her head. At least half a year, it will take a long time to repair the gun body. Do your best, and I'll raise your capital. Hearing this, Aeolia's eyes lit up, and she quickly bowed to Roja. Thank you, sir. Since the development of the Research Institute, it is no longer the time when Tianjin Yashang used funds arbitrarily. Tianjin Yashang, Gage, Aeolian, Vegapunk, each has several research topics. As we all know, scientific research activities, no matter which world they are in, are a gold-swallowing monster. Even Roja has to make details of the allocation of funds to curb these gangsters who want to expand their research and increase their interest in topics. After leaving from Aeolia, Roja hurried straight to his home. While rushing, he connected to Skynet to check recent information. However, knowing that he had browsed all the information, Roja did not see the one he expected. What is the world government doing? Is it really going to pretend to be deaf? Or is there another conspiracy? Roja couldn't help frowning. As early as when he arranged to rescue Marco, Roja had already made a move to turn against the world government. It is even said that Estes in the West Sea has also assembled an army, ready to take advantage of Roja and the world government to occupy the West Sea in one fell swoop, and to contain the world government on both sides at the same time. However, what Roja didn't expect was that the world government would not tell the troops to crusade him, and there was no letter at all, as if he didn't know that Roja had beaten Garp before and annihilated many members of CP0. This abnormal behavior made Roja a little uncomfortable. Roja never imagined that Karp did not report Roja to the top at all, and even said that he even blocked the intelligence of the G5 branch without permission. It can be said that because of Karp's actions, the world government is confused. Where is Marco? Where is Blackbeard who escorted Marco? CP0 members sent out have completely lost contact. Did he die or was he caught? CP0 members were prohibited from contacting the outside world at will from the very beginning. This also led to the fact that after the appearance of the Don Quixote family and the Dimension Brigade, the world government could not get any information from CP0. As a result, the world government was stunned. Chapter 276 Rebellious Lelouch Ending. Marin Fando, in the Marshal's office. The Warring States period unpacked the new issue of Dream magazine with some emotion. It's about to end, the rebellious Lelouch. Since he is dressed like this, it means that Lelouch has ruled the world. Road. Wearing a white-dominated, golden-outlined imperial costume, on top of the imperial costume representing sacredness and supreme power, a few huge rubies are neatly inlaid, showing grace and luxury. Seeing the indifference on Lelouch's face that almost overflowed from the painting, Sengoku couldn't help sighing. I have to say that this manga by Gao Shi is really good at creating characters. Even the Warring States period, which is rarely brought into manga, can't help but bring himself into it this time. Watching Lelouch go step by step to this day, from a rather gentle and wise boy, to today's iron-blooded emperor, who has always regarded Lelouch as a childlike Warring States, is really a little uncomfortable. In fact, at the very beginning, Sengoku was really not interested in the speeches such as, save the world, change the world, destroy the empire, and, create a world that my sister likes. But as the episodes went on, the Warring States had to admit that he was actually addicted to this comic that seemed to be very second level at first, but was actually very deep. With a long sigh, Sengoku slowly opened the magazine with a deep reluctance to end the manga. At the beginning of the comic, following the end of the previous issue, Lelouch stood in the top garden of Damocles and asked his sister, Nonali, in a wheelchair to manipulate Damocles and the ultimate weapon love. Goddess, scepter of control. As long as he gets the scepter that controls Damocles and the goddess of love with the super weapon, Lelouch can forcibly suppress the world by force. In the debate between Lelouch and Nonali, Shumu Suzaku, who chose to help Lelouch, is also fighting the final battle with the fellow top pilot, Karen. When he saw Shumu Suzaku being killed by Kalyan, a look of astonishment appeared on Zangguo's face. In his impression, Shumu Suzaku is completely the top pilot in Lelouch's world. In addition, Shumu Suzaku is assisted by Gios that Lelouch once deployed, so he should be invincible in Lelouch's world. How did this get killed? An absurd look appeared on Sengoku's face, and his mood couldn't help but feel a little down. Among the preferences of the Warring States, Shumu Suzaku and Lelouch are not equal to each other. The reason why Shumu Suzaku can stand shoulder to shoulder with Lelouch in the hearts of the Warring States is because the concept that Shumu Suzaku adheres to is part of the Warring States period. The ideas coincide. Save what you want to save in a peaceful way, starting from within the forces that rule the world and changing the world. However, it is such a character that he loves so much to die so casually. What is going on? Karen can't beat Shumu Suzaku at all, okay. For a while, Sengoku was a little crazy, holding on to the magazine tightly, as if he wanted to throw it out, but in the end, he put down the magazine, smoothed the folds obediently, and flipped through it again. After reading it, throw it away, and after reading it, throw it away. Warring States secretly said in his heart. When he saw that Lelouch finally used Gios on Nonali, he said, Nonali, I love you, to Nonali who had been controlled and lost her mind. After Nonali regained consciousness, when he put on an arrogant look again, Zangguo's eyes couldn't help but be a little sour. 9 flowers. From the beginning, Lelouch did everything for Nonali's sake. In the end, he turned against his sister and couldn't even say, I love you, in person. It made Warring States feel very uncomfortable. The plot of the next few pages is simple. Lelouch, who got the final weapon, shocked everyone after destroying thousands of mechas with one blow. During the broadcast to the whole world, Lelouch stood in front of the huge screen and uttered the declaration that remained in his heart for a long time. Lelouch v Britannia hereby orders, The whole world, obey me. Close black lens bracket. When Lelouch said these words, there was a strange feeling in the heart of the Warring States period. Not long after reading this comic, including the Warring States period, all readers were looking forward to the day when Lelouch would rule the world. But today, the so-called world domination has deteriorated, and even the Warring States period does not know whether he should or not, because Lelouch is happy that his dream has finally been fulfilled. With complicated thoughts in his mind, Sengoku slowly turned to the next page. Is this the end? Looking at Lelouch sitting on the throne of the mobile palace, bound on the left and right columns are his former companions, the rebels who are now about to be executed. That's not right. Seeing this, Sengoku suddenly pinched the thickness of the magazine. How many pages are there? Are there any new changes? Chapter 277 After Zero Requiem. Just when Warring States' curiosity was aroused, there was a knock on the door of the office. Dong dong dong. Come. Sengoku looked down at the cartoon, but didn't even lift up. The door was violently pushed open, and Garp strode in. Yo, Warring States, did you miss me? Garp sat on the sofa directly opposite Warring States, took out a bag of senbei from the back of the sofa and ate it. I think what are you doing? Sengoku didn't even look at Garp, he flipped the comic lightly. You guy, you're really cold, you're ignoring me. Garp covered his eyes with his arm and pretended to be sad, but before he could finish speaking, Senguotang, who was directly opposite him, stood up and let out an uncontrollable exclamation. Zero. What zero? Garp, who was taken aback by Sengoku, also stood up and looked around nervously. But when Garp saw Sengoku sit down again and read the manga, he couldn't help sighing. It turned out to be a comic. I thought there was an enemy. Being so frightened, Garp lost his playfulness, walked over and patted the table in front of Sengoku. Hey, old man, don't look at it yet, I have something to tell you. I'm seeing the critical moment, wait until I finish it. Warring States waved his hand impatiently, looking at the comics attentively, his eyes brimming with brilliance. At this time in the comics, a man wearing a black cloak tights and a black helmet appeared directly opposite the mobile palace where Lelouch was sitting. And the clothes this mysterious man was wearing were exactly the clothes Lelouch used to conceal his identity when he was still Zero. What the hell is going on? Lelouch has already ruled the world, who dares to pretend to be Zero, courting death? With full of curiosity and doubts, Sengoku turned the page again. Garp, who was beside him, sighed silently when he saw Sengoku's concentration, and sat back on the sofa, holding the senbei, and started to eat in depression. When Sengoku saw that Zero in the comics used a movement that surpassed the limits of human beings and ran in Z to avoid bullets, his eyes suddenly lit up. This physical ability, this movement technique, this guy is Shumu Suzaku, yes, this must be Shumu Suzaku. However, what is Shumu Suzaku going to do at this time? Seeing the resurrection of Shumu Suzaku, the Warring States couldn't help but feel joy in his heart. It's great that Shumu Suzaku didn't die. Zero pretended to be Shumu Suzaku, broke through many obstacles, jumped on the mobile palace, and stood opposite Lelouch. A bad premonition emerged in the heart of the Warring States. That's not right. Warring States' hands suddenly trembled, and some did not dare to turn to the next page. However, curiosity still prevailed, and Sengoku pinched the footer and slowly turned over. When he saw Shumu Suzaku took out his long sword and stabbed Lelouch to death, a look of astonishment appeared on Zongguo's face. This turning point is too big. Lelouch, who ruled the world, was actually killed at such a grand ceremony, under the watchful eyes of countless people. The plot seems to have gone to a place that Warring States never thought of. The comics continued, and with a heavy heart, Sengoku read the comics and gradually understood the whole story. That plan called Zero Requiem. Lelouch plays the role of a complete villain, the devil who rules the world. Through autocratic dictatorship, the contradictions become more concentrated and prominent, and all the hatred in the world is concentrated on Lelouch. 0, the incarnation of justice, and in the eyes of everyone in the world. Kill the devil. After that, 0 will become the real savior, and the hatred in people's hearts will be healed by time because there is no target of hatred, and will gradually dissipate. After the death of Tyrant and Demon King Lelouch, the world will usher in a new life, and all forces will be redivided. Under Lelouch's prior arrangement, all rulers are good-hearted beings. Shu Nigel, whose wisdom is not weaker than him, will rule behind the scenes, and Shumu Suzaku will play 0 all his life, because it was really Shumu Suzaku, who was killed by Kalyan in the final battle. In this case, the superpower to deter the world will no longer exist, wars can be avoided, and everything can be discussed on the table, not on the battlefield. Such a world is Lelouch's dream world. With the sacrifice of one person, in exchange for the happiness of the whole world. This is 0 Requiem. Amid the grief-stricken cry of Nonali and the cheers of the people because of Lelouch's death, the whole comic slowly drew to a close. When everyone shouted the name of the hero and praised the hero's great deeds, they didn't know that the real hero had fallen. The hatred of the world is concentrated on me. As long as I disappear, the chains of hatred will be cut off, and everyone will have no reason to hate anymore. Looking back at the previous page, when Lelouch said these words calmly, warring states could not help trembling. Hey, what's wrong with you in the warring states? You cried. Seeing the abnormal state of the warring states, Garp quickly stood up and pointed at the tears on the face of the warring states in horror, feeling a little overwhelmed all of a sudden. What did he see? Wise General, warring states, who has been galloping in the sea for many years and is known as the pillar of the navy, actually cried. Wouldn't he be attacked by a special devil fruit? Garp had a ridiculous idea in his mind. Anyway, the fact that the warring states cried is too weird. Warring states was stunned for a moment, and smeared twice on his face in a hurry. Who cried, "You were wrong just now." During the panic, warring states accidentally touched the magazine on the ground. Just when warring states was about to pick up the magazine, he suddenly discovered that a colored card had fallen out of the title page of the magazine. What is this? Sengoku picked up card 4.2 in confusion. When he saw the content on the card, he suddenly laughed. Ha, that's the way it is. Good. It's good not to die. Ha. Isn't it crazy? Could it really be done by a capable person? Looking at Sengoku, who was crying and laughing for a while, Garp couldn't figure out the situation for a while. Let me see what makes you laugh so happily. Out of curiosity, Garp grabbed the card and glanced at it. Is this thing worth laughing at? Garp scratched his head and threw the card on the table in confusion. On the card stock are a few small storyboards. At the end of the storyboard, the green-haired shawl girl and the boy dressed as a farmer sat shoulder to shoulder. The boy's face was no longer oppressed by the shadow of the world, and the sun-like smile seemed to spread warmth all over the world. Chapter 278 Shock. Warring States weeps bitterly. Warring States in the room also felt Garp's strange gaze, wiped away the remaining tears on his face, and coughed twice in embarrassment. Cough, did you just ask me for something? Are you all right? Garp circled around the Warring States period, as if looking at a rare animal. If I say it's okay, don't talk nonsense. Hey, I've known you for so many years, but I didn't realize that you are a crybaby. Garp seemed to have discovered a new world, his face full of excitement. You don't know how funny you looked just now. If I hadn't known there was a phone bug nearby, I would have taken one and photographed it for you. Excited, Garp didn't notice Sengoku's gradually darkened face, and continued chattering. I've already thought about the title, so it's called Shock. Admiral Sengoku, weeping in front of Garp. Quote. I tell you, if you sell this photo, it will be a fire. The price doesn't have to be too high. It's the same price as the fantasy magazine. Anyone can afford it. When everyone in the world comes back to buy it, there will definitely be one for everyone. Hey, thinking about it this way, it seems that all the military spending in 2008 has been lost. Do you think so? Carp turned his head excitedly, immersed in his own obscenity. But when he saw that Warring States was exuding black energy and walked towards him step by step with his head down, his face suddenly panicked. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing in the Warring States period? Why are you clenching your fists? Don't scare me. The old man is old, but he can't resist. I don't know if you can resist, but I know you must resist. Warring States said in a terrifying tone, and the black aura on his body became thicker and thicker. Of course we resisted beatings. It's not like we haven't fought before, just your little fist. Grip the grass. What are you doing? Don't use your abilities, you will die. Ah, killed, killed, Admiral killed. Boom. Bang bang bang. Boom. 10 minutes later, Sengoku sat in the open-air office, rubbed the bruises on his face, and looked at Garp across from him speechlessly. I just scare you, but you actually do it. Huh, I'll do it. Hiss. It hurts. Garp rubbed his arm, with a pair of dark circles under his eyes, and exclaimed, You bastard, when are you so shameless? Heavier. No, it should be several points. Okay, I won't argue with you. What's the matter with me? Warring States waved his hand, and gestured to get the teacup on the table. But after seeing that his beloved teacup had been shattered to pieces, Warring States twitched the corners of his eyes and sighed helplessly. You asked me to block the news for you before. I have blocked it. At least for a few months. There will be no news from the government, but why? Ideographic, WM. Well, that's enough. Speaking of business, Garp also gathered his playful attitude and nodded solemnly. With Garp's ability alone, of course, it is impossible to avoid the pervasive espionage agencies and block the news of the war with Roha, so Garp will find Sengoku. Of course, it's not because of Garp's lack of prestige and strength, but because of the difference in their ability to drill camps. Garp's prestige does not affect the espionage agencies directly under the world government at all, but the Warring States period was able to find those people one by one through special channels. Spies, stop them from spreading the word. So, why exactly? The Dimension Brigade's incident this time is indeed a bit too much. Sengoku crossed his hands, leaned his chin, stared at Garp, and quietly waited for Garp's answer. I feel, we're thinking too easily. Immediately, Garp explained what Roha told him, as well as his own analysis, and told Sengoku everything. After listening to Garp's words, Sengoku sat quietly on the chair, lost in thought, and after Garp finished speaking, he also seemed to be relieved and leaned lazily on the sofa. It's nice to have someone help brainstorm. Garp thought happily as he chewed the senbei. This is also the way Garp and Warring States have always cooperated. Warring States is responsible for brains, and Garp is responsible for hands-on. Of course, Warring States will occasionally move hands, but Garp has never liked to use his brains. After a long time, Warring States slowly opened his eyes and shook his head with a wry smile. I didn't expect to be helped by a group of lawless guys. Well, I also know about this. You go back first. Don't forget to call a team of repairers for me when you get down there. Oh, by the way, the money is deducted from your salary. Sengoku added with a smirk. Che, stingy guy. Garp curled his lips and was about to leave. But at this moment, the Warring States suddenly stopped him. What's the matter? Garp clasped his nose and turned his head impatiently. You said, what if I wear a mask? Warring States picked up the cartoon on the table and covered half of his face. Light and shadow alternated, and at this moment, the face of Warring States became a little weird. Ugly. Garp raised his middle finger, and then strode out, following the door without a door. Watching Garp leave, Sengoku put down the magazine in his hand and sighed silently. Turning his head to look at the flag of the world government hanging on the wall, there was an intriguing look in Sengoku's eyes. What do you guys think? Even in the situation just now, Sengoku didn't tell Garp. In fact, this time he decided to publicly execute Marco and ambush the consequences of the Whitebeard pirates' plan. Sengoku had already thought about it. If not, Under the pressure of the world government, how could Sengoku make such a reckless plan? If it was changed to the previous one, the Warring States period would probably only be regarded as a world government eager for success, eager to weaken the power of the four emperors. But now, he couldn't help but have some doubts about the purpose of the world government. The battle between the Navy and the Whitebeard pirates can certainly weaken the strength of the four emperors, but the strength of the Navy 420 will also be weakened a lot. Especially in that situation, Sengoku and Garp would never let Whitebeard do whatever they wanted, and could only fight against Whitebeard together. If the two of them successfully killed Whitebeard, then of course it would be a great thing. However, if one of Garp and Sengoku accidentally died in Whitebeard's dying counterattack, then Warring States has been a little afraid to think about it any longer. Is it because one of the five of you died, so you are in a hurry? Warring States looked in the direction of Mary Joa. His eyes were deep, as if he had crossed thousands of mountains and rivers, staring at the four people standing at the top of the world. Regardless of the purpose of the five old stars, the Warring States period does not intend to pursue further investigations. After all, he is still a subordinate of the world government, as long as he obeys the orders and tries his best to reduce the harm. However, Roha finally let Garp tell him the words that circulated in Sengoku's mind and lingered. What I insist on is the justice of the world government or the justice of ordinary people. Muttering these words in a low voice, Sengoku's eyes were a little low, but his hand couldn't help but press the card on the table. On the card paper, Lelouch's heart-warming smile pierced Zhongguo's eyes and pierced his heart at this moment. The devil who ruled the world gave up everything for the sake of world peace and the happiness of the people. And what about him as a naval marshal? The Warring States period froze in place, not moving for a long, long time. Chapter 279 Naruto, Serialize. Roha calmed down all of a sudden. Since the last time Marco was rescued, the world government has fallen into a strange silence. Not only has the Navy stopped making big noises, but even the world government has rarely issued orders. As if something was brewing. The dullness of the world government often represents the activity of the rest of the forces. The Whitebeard pirates are still looking for Blackbeard all over the world. The cyborg warriors of the Dimension Brigade in the New World began to suppress the chassis that once belonged to Kaido in an iron-blooded way, driving away and killing all the forces that reached out to this chassis. The anti-pirates, who have been restless all the time, don't know what they are doing recently, and their troops are frequently mobilized. There are even rumors that Katakuri in Samsung Desert has left Cake Island. But all of this has nothing to do with Roha, when he was halfway through the Naruto manga. Naruto, after much anticipation, has finally started serialization. Because of the powerful plot of the rebellious Lelouch in the last serialized comic, countless people are looking forward to a new comic. However, to the surprise of all readers, the serial load of this new comic is actually twice as much as before. The magazines that increase the volume and do not increase the price make all readers feel that they are cheap. And this new comic by Coates also did not disappoint readers. The appearance of the protagonist Naruto Uzumaki has a very strong personality. The tragic life experience, the young man with low talent, coupled with the hard work and unyielding character, all of a sudden many readers fell in love with him. Female readers sympathized with Naruto and wanted to see his success, and even more gossip guessed Naruto and Sasuke, who could win Sakura's heart. Male readers, on the other hand, felt a strong sense of substitution in Naruto. In this world, there are too many people with no talent, ordinary life experience, and even miserable. Some of them may work hard to seek the day to change their fate, while more think that efforts are useless and are willing to ordinary. And a protagonist like Naruto made them feel the slightest sense of identity, as if they saw themselves. They wanted to see how far Naruto could go with his own efforts. Naturally, after Naruto used the multi-shadow avatar technique for the first time to defeat Mizuki, readers from all over the world cheered in unison. In the following comics, the world of Naruto has gradually opened the tip of the iceberg, and the huge worldview has attracted the interest of countless people. Speculation about Naruto world has spread all over the world, and it has intensified. However, even Roha did not expect that the most discussed topic among readers is how many issues of Naruto can be serialized. Hey, Sister Kuroko, how long do you think Brother Roha's comic can be serialized? At Roha's house, Sugar, sitting on the sofa, held a fantasy magazine and asked curiously. Well, if it's serialized. Shirai Kuroko turned his fingers, tilted his head and thought for a while. I guess it will only be 10 issues. Not more than 20, this is because he increased the number of pages per issue this time. In this case, after all, he has only serialized as many comics in the past. Quote. Really? Masaka Makoto, who was beside her, closed the advanced physics textbook written by Ioria, and raised her eyebrows playfully. What are you looking at over there? Huh. Shirai Kuroko was stunned for a moment, then turned his head to look. His face suddenly became bitter. In the corner of the hall, there are 4 small bookshelves. That's where Roha used to put every issue of the magazine and the comic book. However, the most eye-catching is the elementary school students occupying an entire bookshelf. Yes, the Conan series. Ah, I forgot about this Lifetime series. Kuroko fell to Masaka Makoto's chest with a look of frustration, and even if she was blocked by Masaka Makoto's hand, she tried her best to dig in. You bastard! Masaka Makoto glared, her hair flashing with electricity. Zzz. A few minutes later, Kuroko Shirai sat obediently on the ground in a pitch-black suit, spitting out a puff of black smoke. Sister, how long do you think this Naruto can be serialized? Hearing this, Masaka Makoto blinked and thought for a moment. I estimate that there may be 40 or 50 issues. Shirai Kuroko looked surprised. No way. So many. That's right, my brother shouldn't draw another one. There are as many as that ugly manga, right? Shatang agrees to the side. For the timid Shatang, the somewhat scary Conan is naturally divided into ugly, a class. Not much, think about it. Naruto has 4 grades, namely, the lower class, the middle class, the upper class, and the shadow, and I estimate that it is among these 4 classes, or even higher. There should be other grades. If I look at the talent of the protagonist named Naruto Uzumaki now, his strength may not improve too fast, and it is estimated that it will rise for a long time. To be honest, it's the first time I've seen Roha draw a cartoon with such a clear level, and I don't know much about it. Masaka Makoto made a well-founded analysis, and she heard Kuroko Shirai and Sugar, 2 guys who don't like to use their brains, nodded in unison. What are you discussing? Roha, who had been drawing cartoons in the room and took time out to stroll, couldn't help asking when he saw this scene in the living room. Brother Roha. Sugar ran up cheering, hugged Roha's waist, and asked cutely with her pretty face up. How long can Naruto be serialized? Naruto, how long? Hearing this question, a strange look appeared on Roha's face. Well, should exhaust one's youth. Chapter 280 Ninjutsu. Ninjutsu. Tisk, am I African or European? Roha was lying on the bed with some decadence, looking at the props he just extracted, a little speechless. He has been too busy during this time, and Naruto has already started serialization, so he can draw a lottery. When his hands are itchy, he wants to draw millions of fans to play. As a result, it turns out that the lottery is completely out of control. As soon as I started pumping a bunch of garbage, Roha planned to put it away, but suddenly I got a chance of really thousands of hands. This time, Roha was motivated, and he kept drawing lottery while fantasizing about drawing more powerful ninjutsu. The result is predictable. A small bet is good, a big bet hurts the body, and a strong bet is gone. After spending all his savings, Roha's real income is only 3. Ninjutsu, Shanfa, thousands of hands, transformation. Character card, Uruka. That's right, it's these 3, 2 rubbish with 1 magic skill. I must have been caught in an illusion just now. Roha collapsed on the bed with a haggard face, looking at the big zero on the fan value, his heart ached. It's all so spent. Moreover, if Roja remembers correctly, this thing is really thousands of hands. It is not 253 that ordinary people can use. It seems that it can only be used in fairy mode. Hey, system, really thousands of hands can't only be used in fairy mode, can I use it? Roja asked in his mind with a fluke. Can be used, any props extracted by the host, the consumption required will be converted into consumption of the host's physical strength. Close black lens bracket. It's not bad. Hearing the system's answer, Roja recovered a little bit of energy and sat up with a smile. That's really thousands of hands, the ultimate move of the god of ninjas, Senju Hashirama. It is known as the super ninjutsu of the top wood escape ninjutsu. It can even defeat Uchiha Madara's majesty in a head-to-head attack. Susano is shattered. I just don't know how the consumption of thousands of hands is, but don't drain my stamina all at once. After learning the skill cards of thousands of hands, Rome took out another card. Character card. Uruka. Rank. Chunin. Looking at this card, Roja's heart has a sense of anticipation, of course not because of Uruka's strength, but because Uruka knows how to practice ninjutsu. That's right, Roja wants to give it a try, whether people outside the Naruto world can practice ninjutsu. If you can. That's interesting. Roja raised his mouth in anticipation and threw the card into the air. System, summon Uruka. This time's call is far less powerful than the previous few times. Uruka, wearing a ninja costume, slowly walked out of the small circle and came to Roja. Sir. Uruka came to Roja and knelt down halfway. Suddenly seeing Uruka look so respectful, Roja couldn't help but froze for a while, feeling a little uncomfortable for a while. The guys who were summoned before were either arrogant or outrageous, or they were fighting against him in various ways, and even said that Estes still wanted to fall in love with him. Suddenly such a docile guy came, and warmth suddenly rose in Roja's heart. You see, this is what a summoned creature should look like. You should really let those rebellious guys study hard. Get up. While moved, Roja took the initiative to get Uruka up. After a simple conversation, Roja also understood the time period when Uruka came here. That was when the Naruto plot was just beginning, which meant that Uruka had been a teacher at the ninja school for a long time. Uruka, do you remember how to refine chakra? Roja asked expectantly. Of course. Uruka nodded without hesitation. Chakra refining is the most basic course in ninja school, and I teach it several times every year. Well, tell me the method of refining chakra, and you will be responsible for it from today on. Teach me. Me, teach you. Uruka pointed to himself and then to Roja, with a look of astonishment. No matter how weak his strength is, he can still feel the terrifying power in Roja's body. Is this kind of character still taught by him? Yes, just teach me to learn ninjutsu. Roja's face showed an excited look. 10 minutes later, in the training ground at Roja's home. Uruka stood in front of Roja and began to explain the basic knowledge of chakra to Roja. Chakra is the source of energy for performing ninjutsu, illusion, and taijutsu. It is a special energy produced by the perfect fusion of the energy of the various components in the human body. And this special energy consists of 3 types. The first is the body energy that is absorbed from the 130 trillion cells in the human body. And the third, I don't know much about this, but you should know what's going on from the look of the adults. Shanju, natural energy, I know this. Roja nodded lightly. As expected of an adult. Uruka glanced at Roja in surprise, suppressed the idea of asking about immortality, and began to formally teach Roja the skills of refining chakra. This practice is 10 days. 13 days later, Roja sat cross-legged on the bed at home, his eyes were closed, and his mind was completely immersed in the body. This is already the 13th day of his practice of chakra refining. During these 13 days, Roja has been balancing the energy of each component in the body. Although Roja has not extracted any trace of chakra until today, he has received other surprises. His physical fitness is actually improving continuously when balancing the energy components in his body. As of today, pure strength alone has increased by 20%. Maybe 20% sounds like a small amount, but for a person of his level, every aspect of his body is close to the limit. If there is no special cultivation method, every step is as difficult as reaching the sky. But now, after only 13 days of practice, his strength has increased by 20%, which makes Roja not surprised. Feeling that the energy in the body is getting more and more refined, the physical quality is improving little by little, and the emotions of joy are brewing in Roja's heart. But at this moment, a warm current suddenly appeared in his body. Although it was just a little bit, Roja opened his eyes with a swipe, with an unbelievable look on his face. Can't go wrong, it's definitely chakra. He actually succeeded. Successfully practiced chakra in the pirate world.